What happens regularly today that would horrify a person from 100 years ago? Fun fact, when the escalator was first introduced, it only went up a few feet, and whiskey was given to calm the nerves of people who tried it, so probably the fact that those exist and they're taking people hundreds of feet into the air. My dad told me my great-grandfather was appalled that a restroom was inside the house. The amount of married couples without kids compared to the amount of unmarried couples with kids, and Germany's position in the world. Oh, if I met a person from 100 years ago, oh, you're from 1925, so World War I is still going on, right? What do you mean, one? Oh, those people would not be prepared for modern movies with CGI realism. Take them to a new horror movie and that would literally horrify them. With no idea what a computer can create visually, they'd have to assume people are getting slaughtered on camera for the entertainment value. I remember reading that back then, people were terrified by the ending of The Great Train Robbery, where the main robber fires his gun directly toward the camera. Access to the most WTF adult material you can find online. 100 years ago is 1925, not long after the Great War, so maybe airplanes? I live near a small airstrip, so I hear light aircraft so often that it's just part of the background noise now. But I imagine that in the dawn of aviation, when planes had been newly used for war, it would be pretty horrific. People running around everywhere half naked for health. Nuclear weapons might horrify them, also seeing how overdeveloped their old homes might be, especially if they had a farm near a city. Hey, do you still use those bombs after we won World War I and bought peace, or did you discard them all? Oh, we made one that could level a city in World War II. I think what's fascinating about theoretical comparisons like this is that there were people who lived through the trench warfare and even straight-up melee cavalry charges of prior conflicts who were seeing atomic bombs by the time they died. Like, holy heck, talk about your world just completely transforming during your lifetime. Air travel. For anyone not thinking that they'd be horrified, I'm including flamethrower-wielding drones with holographic projections of dragons in my air travel response. So, ha. This one, though, I can't imagine the faces of the Wright brothers as they watch an Airbus A380 or a Boeing 787 Dreamliner scream through the sky. Trying to explain jet engines or the more modern turbofan engine, turbofan engines are what's found on most modern large aircraft, they'd crap themselves, especially seeing how easy it's become to fly such massive distances. Electricity fricking everywhere. France and Germany showing each other support and encouragement. Also, people refusing to vaccinate for diseases that used to be widespread and killers. Maybe spending so much money on every grocery shop on food that ultimately gets thrown out. Just food wastage overall, really. I remember my granny telling me a story about when my uncle spilled the jug of cordial everywhere when he was a kid, and she cried all day because it was their treat for the week and it got wasted. My Oma always had a story about how they'd use a chocolate ration during World War I. She was sneaky and would cut 9 pieces of chocolate for her family of 8 so that she could get 2. They'd save all of the breadcrumbs and just scrape the mold off anything, and fruit was a godsend. The Third Reich had taken all of their gold, so my Opa proposed to my Oma using a box of strawberries. They just celebrated their, 75th anniversary? They're 96 and 94. She told us they'd sometimes eat tulip bulbs and grass to fill their stomachs. She always said being overweight was a good thing. Food was a celebration. Show a surgeon from 1918 a Da Vinci surgical robot and watch him lose his mind. Alternatively, tell a surgeon from 1918 the mortality rates of modern surgery. You can pull a device out of your pocket and receive an unsolicited pic of someone's trouser monster. How so many more of the population are fat. My father-in-law comes from a farming family in Minnesota, and he has all of these pictures of past generations hanging up. 3 generations ago, they were a clan of lean, good-looking blondes. The blonde hair has remained, but a lot of them are past 300 pounds now. The juxtaposition is shocking. There are a lot of good points being already made in this group, so I'll add the less obvious things, like being in public without a hat, colorful clothing with logos and slogans, robots, casual swearing, women doing men's work, and loud music everywhere. Discussions of World War II. Imagine knowing you had that coming your way. Oh, they did that on an episode of Doctor Who. A World War I officer was sent to the future due to time shenanigans. When the Doctor meets him, he says, "Looks like you're a World War I officer based on your uniform," and the guy just looks shocked and replies, "What do you mean, one?" Interracial couples. Loving vs. Virginia didn't happen until 1967. Until then, you'd be arrested and run out of town for marrying outside your race. Even in the North, it might not have been illegal, but it was heavily frowned on. I highly recommend people read The Color of Water by James McBride. He details some of the crap his white Jewish mother dealt with by marrying black men in the 50s and 60s in New York City. Fashion. The bikini didn't arrive until the 50s. Imagine being a Victorian lady and seeing a woman in a bikini. Your underwear covers your whole body, so you can't even consider that. And yes, I'm well aware that 100 years ago was only 1925, and I'm well aware that Queen Victoria and thus her era died in 1901. We all know this, thank you for the dozens of corrections. But there were still Victorian ladies living in the 20s, guys, and they would indeed clutch their pearls in despair over what scandalous lows we trollops have sunk to if they ever saw what we wore. Even to bed. I'm lounging around the house in a big t-shirt and having a giggle that this would ever happen. Kinda like how our parents think our shorts are too short. The parents of the 20s kids were appalled at knees showing as well. Enjoy your days, everyone. Black people buying property in your neighborhood. Sadly, my parents still worry about this. They're not scared of black people, they think it'll just make the property value drop. Huh, your parents are racist, dude. Yeah, no crap. Gay marriage. Why not kill two birds with one stone? Interracial gay marriages. Huh, a gay pride parade would give most of them a seizure. Men in space every day. Yeah, we don't travel to the moon anymore, but there are a few men in space regularly now. Oh, and the fact that there are women in space too. That'd be the cherry on the cake. The fact that you said we don't travel to the moon anymore would cause a crazy reaction. The follow-up questions on that last bit. Why don't we go there anymore? Are there monsters? What happened? I asked my grandmother this very question back in 2008. She was born in 1913 and lived to be 96. Without skipping a beat, she said, "The way people treat each other." I was hoping for an answer regarding technological advances, anything other than the brutally honest answer I received. My grandmother was Welsh and Cherokee. She married a Lebanese man. She wore pants. She was a nurse. She and my grandfather had friends of many races and faiths. It wasn't always easy for them, but they were close, and their friends were close. She told me families aren't as close anymore, people don't know their neighbors, people have little regard for others and their safety. She talked about speeding through neighborhoods with children and how everyone was always in a hurry today. She didn't like the internet, and she said it put even more distance between people. I really believe she had some valid points. The amount of excess we have around us and the amount of things we throw away. We spend tons of money on crap food and clothes we don't need. Even just one generation back, my mum told me to stop buying my kids toys and I'm spoiling them. They get toys on birthdays and Christmas and that's it. She said they don't need a new Lego pack, they need imagination to use the older packs differently and to go outside. I completely agree, my sons are a little spoiled, but I usually stop buying in August to prepare them for Christmas. I still feel really guilty for all the excess. I need to donate some toys. Being on the other side of the world in a few hours compared to it taking weeks to travel that far 100 years ago. Heavy metal. Just imagine Edith being horrified when James Hetfield is screaming, "Master! Master!" My browser history. You don't need to go back 100 years for that to horrify someone. Probably how much people swear these days. Words like hell and damn were considered profane once upon a time. Compared to some of the stuff you hear on the radio nowadays, it's all incredibly quaint in retrospect. I don't believe this to be true. When you read anything from that time, it's written in a mode acceptable to everyone, and most usually by someone we'd now think of as an educated mid to upper middle class person. At least, and that's for want of a better term. My granddads were both born around 1900. One was a docker and from Scotland, and the swearing like a docker phrase seems real. The other one was a master shoemaker, which was a really highly skilled job back then, and spoke and wrote like a gent his entire life. Shaved private parts. Social media and people broadcasting parts of their life online for people to see. I don't know, the local newspaper from my hometown is all online and it goes back like 125 years. It's mostly stuff like, the L.R. Smith family had Mr. and Mrs. Wilson over to their farmstead for dinner last Sunday and a wonderful time was had by all. The Lutheran Church muffin and cookie social was well received and over $13 was raised for the local baseball team. It's all stuff like that. I don't think they had much real news. The amount of skin seen in today's fashion. Being brutally honest here, Irish, Black, Native American, Asian, and Hispanic people being allowed to speak on equal terms with German, British, and other Europeans. I'm not even kidding. At the turn of the 20th century, none of those groups had any rights in the US. After 1918, people weren't crazy about the Germans for some reason either. LGBT and interracial couples getting married. People driving vehicles 60+ miles per hour, not to mention that we do it every day within constant close proximity to one another and being killed on the daily by it. Our grandchildren will think of this as the Wild West where people were allowed to drive around willy-nilly. Didn't you crash into each other all the time? Well, yeah, kind of. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Contacting people every minute of the day through cell phone or social media. It's not terrible if you like people. My grandmother can't fathom how easy it is to stay in touch with my sister now that she lives overseas, and regularly recalls when she herself moved overseas in the 50s and got one letter from her mother once a month. I'm not necessarily sure this would horrify them, just deeply offend them at the least. It really depends on what kind of person it is. If it's a World War I vet, then probably getting into a German car or eating a German sausage. If it's a conservative housewife from the South, then either walking down the street and seeing African American people, or watching some adult movies. I think if I had a person from 100 years ago, I'd take them to a museum and hear their point of view on some of the objects there, because they'd have more experience with using them or seeing them. The divorce rate. Also, not going to church. Saying no to your parents. Going south of the border on your partner. I imagine they smelled worse back then. I feel like the following scene could occur with a 100-year-old time traveler. Welcome to the modern kitchen. It's very mechanical, but I see an icebox to keep perishables cold, an oven to bake breads, even what appears to be an electrical Dutch oven to slow-cook meats. Yes, I understand the functional side of what's happening here. Tell me though, what's this switch for? Oh, it operates a set of blades that spin at high speeds at the bottom of the basin. Instant loss of limb if you were to insert your hand. The frick you talking about? Well, most parts of the world don't use incinerators, so it implies that Europeans traveling forwards to the respective kitchens in their parts of the world wouldn't be as mind-blown. I guess it really depends on how many marital aids are suction-cupped to one's fridge. The government monitoring your online activity 24/7. While the internet is recent, just the thought of being spied on might be enough. Obama. Well, there's a lot in that. Black president, Hawaii is a US state, offspring of interracial marriage. A black metal or death metal gig, and any realistic video game. Ankles. Oh, come on, man, they had ankles, they just didn't have knees. This is specific to the United States because most other countries aren't like this. How homelessness and vagrancy and free living are criminalized and corralled today. It's illegal to simply live on one's own without IDs or forms or birth certificates. You can't even work legally without IDs and registrations and tax reports, and so the usual laborer or hobo lifestyle choice is no longer possible. You can't hunt or fish for free in the United States, you need permits. Legally, even living on the barter system off-grid is illegal, as you must claim income received in kind. You can't sleep in the open, under a bridge or in an abandoned building, or anywhere else uninhabited except for a national forest, and even then only for 3 days at a time. And even then you're monitored by the NFS to ensure that you don't have a campfire. You can't just disappear and start your life over again for any reason. You can't change your name except through the courts. In the United States, we also don't have the right to roam the land freely. You want to become a tinker or junkman? The permits and restrictions are prohibitively expensive for professions that used to be a working refuge of the poor, the mentally ill, or the eccentric. If it's not a 9-to-5 job in an office or a crap job at a fast food place, then screw your lifestyle. You'll be measured and sorted. But the worst thing from the perspective of the 1920s is how it's no longer possible, to the point of being demonized and criminalized, to extend normal human kindness to the poor and the vagrant. In some cities, it's illegal to run mobile soup kitchens, mobile showers or laundries, or take people in without incurring the wrath of permits, code enforcement, and chambers of commerce. I study that period, and in particular I pay attention to the folks on the margins of society. I live in a rural area where we face an increasingly transient population fleeing the cities. And today we want those margins and the people in them erased. It's barbaric to allow people to starve. It's savage to prohibit them from making their own way and thus forcing them to starve, and it's unthinkable that we've compensated for our own lack of compassion by barring others from having any of their own. Our disposable culture. Everything's individually packaged and the packaging thrown away. Many things are made like crap and then thrown away when they inevitably break. Food is uneaten and thrown away. No one maintains anything. If you look at clothes, shoes, or household goods from 1918, they're really good quality. The way people treat each other, particularly when dating, lateness, ghosting, all those things. Dear Diary, I was receiving a letter each week from Eunice, but 2 months have passed since our last correspondence. I do believe I've been ghosted. Interracial marriage. After all, Jim Crow laws were enacted 180 years ago. Women taking part in sporting events like bicycling and marathons. Billy Fleming was born in 1914, so he would have been like 11 years old. Also, drinking German beer in America. There was a huge backlash around it, and it was one of the steps leading to the 1920s Prohibition era. The entire notion that women are allowed to pursue lives that don't revolve around being the property of men. I mean, today several billion people still can't fathom that idea. Minor infections of wounds. You can generally treat these at home pretty easily. Widespread use and knowledge of antibiotics wasn't really a thing until after 1940. Men kissing other men in public. Started watching Downton Abbey, so I think they'd be surprised at how much the class system has changed. New money is cooler than old money. Parents being able to vaccinate their kids against diseases that would have killed them back in the day, yet refusing to do so. The way we pamper and worship our pets. What about Egypt, man? They literally worshipped kitties. And the cats have never forgotten this. We spend a lot of our day telling a robot that we are not a robot. Transgenders, drag queens, cross-dressers, and more of this stuff that I don't even know what it's called. The EU would give people heart attacks. I mean, it's 1925, the League of Nations is a thing back then. It would probably shock them that the British government is so cavalier about giving it all up, though. Yes, I think most Europeans of 100 years ago would be pretty freaking ecstatic about the recent peace and international cooperation in what's historically been a competitive and violent region. After sending an entire generation to die in the trenches, most European countries were doing their best to avoid it happening again. Yeah, honestly, at least a lot of the more educated folks back then might feel some satisfaction at a job well done, until they realize that the one country they really hate is in the Union too, and then you'd probably hear some grumblings. Oh, and these comments were written before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Furry conventions. I mean, those are scary today. Honestly, the current state of the day's superpowers back then, the UK and France. Your life all over in some weird public mess called the internet. The quality of life is higher in large cities than the quality of life in the suburbs or rural towns. Kykuit, the John D. Rockefeller estate, is located far outside the boundaries of New York City. Kykuit and Rockefeller Center are 30 miles apart. Bill Gates, on the other side, resides in Medina, which is only a 10-mile drive from downtown Seattle. It's horrifying in a positive sense. Sickness and how it was approached, especially in regards to children. I found a news article about my grandfather yesterday. He was about 2, and somebody had to report to the health department that he was sick, so they sent an agent out to inspect him. If the health agent found him to be sick, the whole family would be put on mandatory quarantine. Luckily, he had made a miraculous recovery by the time the health agent showed up. Details about which kids in the neighborhood were sick were posted in the newspaper. It really served as a reference point for parents. If you knew that your Sally usually played with the Fleming kids, and the Fleming kids were down with scarlet fever, you'd be keeping a sharp eye on how Sally was feeling. Plastic surgery. If you were a rich person from back then, the peasants having rights, I guess. And I've made the mistake of not clarifying that I came at this from a global perspective. For most people living in the 1920s, you were poor and not politically well represented, so they ended up with no rights. The Russian Revolution only happened in 1917, and peasants weren't treated well in many other parts of Eastern Europe. Asian countries also had a huge proportion of peasants until later in the 20th century. How children are allowed to act nowadays in school and in everywhere else. A colored world that isn't a black and white one. That would freak the frick out of me. Access to information. I mean, back then if you wanted to know something, you had to hope your library had a book on it, or that you knew someone who knew it. Now we can literally ask nearly any question to the small box in our pocket and get an immediate answer. The fact that England let go of the colony in India because one guy threatened to starve himself. Oh, come on, dude, that's not why they did it. Gandhi was locked up in prison for most of the war and became irrelevant in the independence movement. The UK was bankrupt and couldn't hold on to two massive populations who wanted their own countries in India and Pakistan. Any news of well-armed militia or insurgency just because of how little people can do? This wouldn't be too surprising. The French Revolution wasn't a too distant memory, and World War I was started by a terror group dissatisfied with foreign occupation. This is not a modern development by any means. Being fired for a comment you made 10 years ago. Facebook listening to your conversations. Man, some of you really think 1925 was the Middle Ages, huh? All the fat people and vegans. Presidential tweets. Let's see. Women wearing bikinis, women voting, women wearing pants, women wearing shorts, women working outside the home, women buying homes without a father or brother or husband co-signing, women having bank accounts, women running for office, women playing sports, women owning businesses, women being in supervisory positions to men, and women eschewing marriage and children. Also, women being surgeons. Anti-vaxxers. Could you imagine hearing about a cure for stuff like polio, tuberculosis, measles, mumps, rubella, or chickenpox? Then hearing about people not wanting that? 100 years ago isn't that long ago. But it was like living in a minefield of incurable, crippling diseases. Touched a doorknob, then my face. Guess I'm coughing blood for no reason. Gender reassignment surgery. Twerking. What was your big, "oh, my parents are gonna kill me" moments that you had as a kid? I put my cheap gel pens in the microwave when I was 11 because they wouldn't work, and my teacher told me that that's because the ink was frozen. Let's just say I had to work extra that summer so that I could get us a new microwave. First time ever getting drunk, 14 years old. Had a bottle of rum and 4 Mike Hard lemonades all mixed into a big jug. I came home that night, my mum just looked at me, and she knew. She didn't get mad, she just said, "Okay, Corey, let's go to bed, it's alright, let's go." I went to bed, and the next day she made me go into school with a ridiculous hangover. That was my punishment. But she always said to me later in life, "What was the point in me yelling at you? You were drunk, there was nothing I could do." For a month, I kept taking the internet cord from my parents' room and running it to the living room, plugged it into the TV box. I was washing the dishes when my dad started reading out the adult movie titles on the bill that month. Oh bro, I've got you beat. My 14-year-old butt came skipping into the computer room happy as a clam one night to see my father staring at the very raunchy story I'd written about my religion teacher. Yep. I basically yipped in fear and went white, and he looked around at me and promptly lost his fricking mind laughing. I ran away to my room as fast as I could, and I hid in my bed until the next day. I was terrified he was going to tell my mum, and I was so embarrassed. That was in 2009, and he's never mentioned it again. As a 2000s kid, stories like these always fascinate me. We were there, but not actually there. Every single day, my mum told me to be careful near the frozen pond next to our house. One day, enough snow melted in order for my friends and I to play soccer on the field next to the pond. As you can guess, at one point the ball ended up dead center in the middle of the pond on the ice. My child brain figured if I could throw a stick on the ice, it was safe to walk on. So, after making sure the ice was stable by throwing not 1, but 2 sticks, I started my walk to get the ball. It was like a scene from a movie. I reached the center, and the second I picked up the ball and attempted to turn around, I fell straight through the ice and went under. I had to break the ice the entire way back to shore and had my clothes dried at a friend's house a few blocks away. By the time I got there, I thought I was on my deathbed, but I could never tell my mum I was dumb enough to go out there, or she'd probably have killed me. I'm now 32 and have still never told my parents I did that. It's funny how many of us risked actual death to avoid being told, "I told you so," by our parents. But then again, I guess a lot of adults risk death or injury to avoid the same reprimand from their spouses, so maybe not that much has changed. This story takes place in the mid-90s. I was 16, skipping school out messing around in my car with friends. Took a turn too fast and put the car in the ditch. We got the car out of the ditch with the help of a passerby. Not a scratch on it by some frickin' miracle. Got home and my dad asks, "So, how was school?" in a way that told me he knew full well I wasn't at school. If there's one thing my father instilled in me, it's this. No matter how bad you mess up, lying about it will only make it worse. Own up, take your punishment, and don't do it again. So I told him exactly what happened. He couldn't really take the car away. I'd purchased it from him for full trade-in value, out of the money I'd saved from working at a pizza joint. But he found other ways to make my life a living hell for the next few months after that. I came to find out the good Samaritan who'd helped us out of the ditch was a co-worker of my dad who'd recognized the car and had called my dad to let him know about my little adventures. I was 17, drove my girlfriend home from school. We ended up in the shower together. Just as we turned off the water and she was stepping out, we hear her dad open the front door of the house. Of course, my truck is in the driveway, so he knows that I'm there, but he's already walking around and knows I'm nowhere else in the house. My short life flashed before my eyes. He came stomping down the hallway and banged on the bathroom door. My girlfriend, wrapped in a towel, answered the door and lied her butt off. Yeah, Steven's down the street at one of our friends' places. I told him I'd call him when I was out of the shower. Meanwhile, I'm standing frozen and shriveled in the shower behind the curtain, preparing to meet the hereafter. Been together 26 years. When I was 12, we were visiting my mum's family for Christmas and staying at an aunt's house like we usually did. Behind her house was a creek that ran through most of the neighborhood. This particular year, it had been really cold and there was snow at least 6 inches deep in most places. I was playing out in the snow and looked back at the creek and saw some really weird icicles that I wanted to get a closer look at. I crossed a fallen log to get to the opposite side of the creek, facing the back of my aunt's house, and walked along the bank looking at the ice. Basically, the creek was flowing and not frozen, but there was a shelf that had frozen above it, and the ice hanging from it had formed into teardrop shapes instead of the typical spikes I was so used to seeing. As I walked, I neglected to see a patch of ice on the bank in front of me and stepped on it with my full weight. I slipped and slid fully into the creek, which was way deeper than I'd anticipated. I was wearing a winter coat, jeans, and insulated boots, all of which became incredibly heavy when they got wet. I was up to my armpits, trying desperately to stay afloat in the freezing cold water and heavy clothes. My only thought was, my mum is going to be so mad. Obviously, I survived the incident. I pulled myself out, stumbled up the bank to a building that I thought was a YMCA and turned out to actually be a fire station. They called my mum, she came to get me, no harm, no foul, and I wasn't in any trouble, although my entire family still mocks me and asks if I'd like to go for a swim every Christmas. When I was 15, my parents were going out for the night, so this seemed to be the perfect opportunity for my boyfriend and my virgin self to do it. We were in the family room, undressed and getting ready to go upstairs to my room when we heard the garage door open. 2 people never moved so fast. We grabbed our clothes and flew upstairs. We sat in my room like, crap, now what? I decided to get dressed and go down to nonchalantly find out what happened. My dad was getting a migraine, so they came home early. My boyfriend was 15 too, so there wasn't a car involved to give us away. He lived in the same development a few blocks away. He'd walked to my house. My parents went to bed, so once we were sure imminent death wasn't upon us, we picked up where we left off. I wouldn't change a thing about that night. It was amazing and special. The sneakiness of it all added another dimension. Unfortunately, my boyfriend had to jump out of my bedroom window to leave. Our dog took a hard no on him leaving the conventional way. But he was able to get onto the portico over the front door and then just jump off that. When I came home to tell them that my girlfriend was pregnant for Thanksgiving of my freshman year of college. So we live in a 2-story colonial. My parents were away on vacation. I'm in the yard and tossing a baseball up in the air and catching it, just a 9-year-old entertaining myself. I think to myself, hey, let's loft it into the first split-level roof and it'll roll off and I'll catch it. On my second toss, crash. I shatter my sister's window. Grandma was babysitting. Grandma reported, I was smoked. I skipped school by leaving the house, climbing on the garage and waiting for my mum to leave. I jumped down to let myself in as she drove off and I set myself up for the day on my PlayStation 1. She then came back as she had forgotten something and I wanted to die in a hole. The yelling was something to behold. I didn't do that again. Getting pulled over by 3 police cars for doing 70 in a 45 zone. My dad happened to call as I was talking with the officers. They asked to speak with him. After a few minutes, they handed the phone back and said, you'd better go home. That's going to be worse than the ticket we were giving you. That was a whole lot of yelling back at my place that night. I don't know about you guys, but it would have to be a pretty massive telling off to be worse than me losing my scarce amount of saved up cash at that age. But then again, I'm looking at this through the lens of an adult. Nobody who's telling me off can legally punish me in any other way than shouting. But yeah, no amount of yelling is going to be worse than a ticket in my book. When I was about 8, my sister, who was 10, and I used to play around the neighborhood with other kids. But we had to be home by 8 p.m. or when the streetlights came on, whichever came first. We had a watch on us, and every evening my mum would make sure that we had one with us and it was working. One evening we were 20 minutes late, and it was the second time that week. If we were late twice in a week, we weren't allowed to go out the rest of the week. My sister and I were talking by the back garden gate, making up excuses why we were late, and making sure we were both on the same page in case she questioned us. We opened the gate to go inside, and my mum was standing on the other side of the gate with her arms folded. That was sort of a life flashed before my eyes moment. A friend and I did this upon sneaking back into the house. We thought we'd made it. We slid into the dark house without waking the dog, eased my normally cranky bedroom door open. We both slipped in, latched it quietly, turned on the light and say, "Frick yeah, we did it!" And my mom was sitting on my bed. Oof. Parents heard that my girlfriend was pregnant. She wasn't, by the way. They'd heard it from mutual friends of theirs and my girlfriend's parents. Dad and I had a long and spirited discussion, I can tell you. The story, as it turns out, was as follows. My girlfriend thought she was pregnant, she'd told her parents, they told a friend, the friend told my parents, and my dad told me. I was driving home early in the morning after a night of playing games at a friend's. I was going too fast on an icy road, lost control of my car, and ended up 40 yards into an icy, flooded field. The car filled with water. I was 16 and had gotten my license just a couple of months earlier. Parents were actually pretty cool about it. The car recovered, but it always had a smell after that. There was a small lizard trapped in our garage under a pile of wood, so I moved some of them so it could get out. I must have accidentally knocked over a larger plank in the process, which landed on my dad's car and went straight through the windshield. The lizard was fine, though. One time I snuck out of the house, and when I went to sneak back in the door, it was locked. We never locked the doors in my house, so I knew I'd been caught. We lived on a farm, so I just went up to the hayloft to sleep the rest of the night. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A little off topic, but a good story. I one time woke up late for school because my alarm didn't go off. I'm incredibly blind without my contacts and just glanced up at the clock and it was very late. In a furious panic to somehow make it to the bus, I put my contacts in, dunked my hair in water, grabbed my backpack and jacket as I sprinted to the bus stop. It's the time of year where it's dark outside well into the morning, so it was still pitch black. No one was at the bus stop, so I figured I missed it. I still waited for some time in case it showed up. When I realized I was so late it wasn't coming, I walked back into my house, knowing I'd have to wake my mum up to take me to school. Fortunately, when I walked through the front door, she was already up waiting for me. She greeted me with, "Where the hell have you been?" I responded that I was sorry but late for the bus and needed her to take me to school. She glared at me and told me it was something like 4 in the morning. I had somehow misread my alarm clock in my state of panic and tried to explain that I really did think I was late and was really at the bus stop. She just assumed I'd snuck out with friends the night before and was just coming home. Something I had been doing off and on for a while at the time, I admit. So I was grounded for sneaking out when in reality I'd just woken up too early to go to school. My sister locked me out of the house, she was still inside. So I went around banging on all the doors and she was ignoring me. I started pounding on her bedroom window and my hand accidentally goes through the window. About 10 years later and I still have a tiny scar on my hand. 17 years old, had a party while the parents were out of town. I had to work the next day but timed it so I'd have plenty of time to clean before they got home that evening. Came home from work, the sprinklers are on and their car is in the driveway. Driving down my driveway I was anxiety and fear personified. I walk in the house and my mum tells me, "Your dad had to leave before you got here, otherwise he was afraid of what he might do to you." I thought it was a good idea to play with some candles while having a Lord of the Rings marathon. Turns out that was a bad idea because I ended up getting distracted and set the family couch on fire. I frantically put it out and threw a blanket over it. I didn't leave that couch for a week. There's a certain level of procrastination that's honestly sort of impressive. For instance, lying on a crusty, burned couch with a blanket draped over it and missing out on other elements of your life just to delay a punishment that you're surely going to get regardless. Nonetheless, I'm kind of wowed you got away with it for that long. My mum left 14-year-old me and my 8-year-old brother alone at home to run an errand. I don't remember what he did, but he royally teed me off, and I had a bad temper as a teenager. So I chucked a cordless phone at his face. He started bleeding everywhere and we both panicked. I'd knocked out one of his teeth. So he ran to the bathroom to see which one, bawling the whole time. As it turns out, it was his extra tooth. He was scheduled to have it pulled a few days later. So then the angry tears turned to grateful tears at avoiding a trip to the dentist. We did still have to call my mum, though, so that she knew why he was suddenly missing a bonus tooth. He confirmed that he was glad I knocked it out, and she went, I have to think about this. Yeah, I was grounded anyway. But this is now one of those stories that we tell because we think it's hilarious. My parents had us each 6 or 7 years apart, so growing up we had a lot of dumb fights. The younger ones still do. It's this particular brother's birthday today, so he's at my house, and he was proud that this was my response to this particular question. His exact thoughts about the story were, after I realized it was the extra tooth, it was frickin' amazing. In our single digits, my older brother locked me out of the house while parents were out. I threw a stick at the back door and shattered the storm door glass. I knew I was going to get a licking, but my bro got the licking instead for locking me out. He was a real jerk to me as a kid, and we're now in our 50s, but he still brings up how guilty he feels for it. That kind of makes up for how much I despised him back then. My parents were away for the weekend. I took my dad's keys and took it for a small drive. I was never allowed to drive unsupervised. I didn't have a license or anything. It was a thrill. I came back, parked, left the keys in the same drawer he left them in, and then Monday arrived. I came back to school and my dad asks me to come look at the car with a death glare. I'd forgot to pull the seat back after adjusting them for my 14-year-old legs. I snuck out and took the car when I was 16 before I had a license to drive at night. I hit a pothole and blew a tire. I rode around on a shredded tire for about 2 or 3 minutes before I drove up on a guy smoking a cigarette in his driveway. He helped me change it. The next morning my parents woke up early and were going to take the car somewhere, and the spare was still on. Luckily, this was right when the Goodyear or Firestone tires were all blowing out, and I told my parents that it happened earlier in the day before, and that I just didn't have the chance to tell them. This guy was 17 and taking driving lessons. Driving age in Germany is 18, and he'd actually passed his driving test. He would be issued his license when he turned 18. The evening before his 18th birthday, he was having a party with his friends as they were partying past midnight to celebrate his birthday. After they had some drinks, his friends convinced him, "Hey mate, you can drive now, let's go for a drive." He stole his mother's car keys and they piled into the car. They made it 200 meters down the road before he crashed into the wall of a house. He was not issued his license, he was only allowed to get one 5 years later. Getting drunk at the age of 14 at a house party. My mum met me a few minutes walk away. She could hear my ridiculously drunk self the entire walk. The 5 seconds between my mum catching me smoking and actually speaking back when I was 14. I was sitting in my back garden with my best friend and we'd recently acquired an air rifle. So obviously we started shooting it at things in an increasingly destructive manner, because we were 11 years old. We shook up and banged out a can of Coke, and then we laughed as it went nuts, spraying its contents everywhere. Then we got a spray can of deodorant, and it was even more ridiculous because it basically went bang, but in a relatively harmless way. Then we got a can of shoe polish. Turns out shoe polish is a little bit flammable. A little bit more flammable than you might expect. The explosion set fire to my stepdad's shed. The can itself went straight up like a surface-to-air missile. Armed police arrived shortly afterwards. At the time, I lived in reasonably central London, and this was in 1991, which happened to be slap bang in the middle of the biggest ever spate of IRA attacks on the city, and a couple of months after some IRA members fired mortar shells at the actual frickin' House of Parliament. The bollocking we got from the police was extreme. But it was nothing compared to the look on my mother's eyes the whole time it was going on, because my friend and I knew that when the police left that things were going to get very bad indeed. The sense of apprehension was even worse than a riot cop carrying a rifle, screaming in our faces about how stupid we were. It was horrifying. We were doomed. And so it came to pass. She went absolutely fricking mental. My mother is a mild-mannered person, but not that day. Not that day. It still terrifies me to think of it almost 30 years later. You probably should have asked the cops if they could have just taken you to prison instead. There's nothing scarier than a mild person who's absolutely livid like that. I was texting my brother asking for help with something so that my mum wouldn't get mad. I called her the B word in the text, and then sent it to my mum. I don't recommend that. I'd just gotten my first ever job at Ace Hardware, and a week in, my buddies hit me up asking if I wanted to head to the beach for the next week. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I told my boss at work a family member had died and I couldn't come in the next week. So my boss called my dad, who also works for the owner of the company in a different department, and starts telling him, I am so sorry for your loss. Please let me know if I can do anything to help. And my dad was like, what do you mean? What happened? And he ended up telling my boss I lied about the entire thing. I still got the week off and went on vacation, but the next few days at my job were nerve-wracking to say the least. I think I was about 4 or 5. There was a rock quarry and gravel pit about a mile from home that my parents didn't want me going to because of a bunch of unseemly youths hanging out there. So of course, this is where my flying experiment took place. I tied 4 kites to my bike and thought if I rode fast enough and then took my bike off the steepest bank of the quarry, the kites would lift me off and I'd glide to the bottom. Probably lucky for me, but the strings of the kite wound into the bike spokes and completely locked it up, throwing me so that I slid all the way down the edge of the gravel pit rather than make a measured jump. I scraped up to my elbows and from my knees down, and all I could think of on that painful walk home, dragging my busted bike full of kites, was how my mum was going to kill me. Suffice to say, when your 5-year-old walks in looking like the finale of Carrie, you don't immediately jump to punishment. Also, my parents are and have always been fantastic and not neglectful. This happened almost 25 years ago in a very nice suburb. It was pretty much the only off-limits zone my parents had for me, which, I mean, moth to the flame, right? I was on my period and got it very heavy for the first time, and was laying back on our new couch in our new house. The couch was pretty expensive, and my parents were really nervous about anyone sitting on it with food or drinks. I got up to go do homework, and I noticed there were about 5 drops of blood stained into the couch. And at that moment, I was done with everything. My parents were actually going to kill me. Plus, I got blood into my favorite sweatpants. They were mad, but they knew I was innocent, and they got it fixed. It's perfect now. What's the strangest thing you've got a guy for? I used to have a guy for buying horses. Seriously though, you need a good one. Let's see, I've got a coupon guy, a mango guy, an egg guy, and a tamales guy. My friend's wife also makes artsy male members on commission, but I've never actually taken her up on that. When I was a waiter in downtown Phoenix 20 years ago, I had a street person on retainer. Parking was difficult on lunch shift. Our restaurant couldn't or wouldn't validate employee parking, so we had to use the meters on the street. Since the meters had a 2-hour limit, you needed to park close enough to be able to run down and feed them in the middle of the lunch rush. Spaces were very limited. One day, soon after starting, I passed the same bum for a 3rd night in a row panhandling. He wasn't at all vocal, just tried doing funny dances and making people smile. Then he'd tell you to have a nice night, never rude or aggressive. I gave him a couple of bucks a few nights in a row and started to notice him during the day too once we became familiar. The first time I saw him after pulling in for a lunch shift, I gave him a handful of change from my coin cup in the console and told him if he fed my meter with it all day, I'd throw him some cash again after my shift. Found out then that his name was Mike. 2 hours later, it's noon 30 and the crew is dashing down to feed their meters or asking whomever is going down to do it for them. I gave someone a couple of quarters and asked them to check on mine while they were at it, just in case. They were back in 5 minutes reporting that my car was good, the hostess's car was good, and 2 other servers bookending my car were good. All of us until 2 p.m. Yeah, some homeless guy's feeding all the meters on this side of the block. The next day, as I was making my way around the gauntlet of one-way roads surrounding the building housing my restaurant, I saw Mike. He was standing in a parking space right by the bottom of the escalator leading up to my work, and as soon as he saw my car, he pulled his pants leg up and did a little chorus line dance move to get my attention. He had been standing there holding the spot for me for the past 15 minutes. Thus it began. Mike held a parking spot for me nearly every morning for the next 2 years. He fed my meter and the meter of any other staff I asked him to. I started keeping car cleaning stuff in my car, Windex, Armor All, and I'd give him towels from the restaurant to detail it up once a week. He knew what bar I hung out at and where I sat. He'd track me down when meters were about to expire or he needed a buck. Everyone at the restaurant and the bar across the street started calling him my bum. He was my friend though too. His name was Mike. He just didn't live anywhere because life is more complicated for some people. But yeah, I had a guy once. A true downtown concierge. The story of Mike is a weird thing. It makes me chuckle, but he clearly wasn't in the best place in life. Still, his jigs and dedication to the job speak of a diligence and a bit of good character that are nice to imagine exist these days. And the fact that someone on waiter money could help him make some valuable cash makes for a nice symbiotic relationship. I have a mushroom guy. Not like the illegal hallucinogenic kind, but some rare, high-quality food-grade mushrooms. I got a guy named Fat Tony who occasionally texts me about rare but cheap musical instruments. He's always trying to loop me in on his side hustle of finding instruments on eBay and repairing them for resale. One day I get a text that says, "Yo, Paulie, this is Fat Tony. I got a Hammond organ for you, $100. And that's how I got my organ. I still have no idea how he got my number or who he really is. We've never met in person. Fat Tony. I'm very old. By the internet standards, I should be dead. When I was a kid, I was Sabbat Goy for the elderly Jewish couple next door. They were very orthodox and there were a bunch of things they wouldn't do on Sabbath, like turn a light off or relight the furnace. It was okay for me to do it for them, as long as it was voluntary and not a paid arrangement because I'm not Jewish. They gave us produce from their kitchen garden, but that was not payment per se. He had the tattoo, and maybe she did too, but she always wore long sleeves. I was glad to help them. I'm a wildlife biology student. I have a plant guy, a bug guy, a reptile guy, a fish guy, and several more. If I stumble upon something I don't know in the field, I know someone who'll know what it is. I have a guy that will bring me a free bouncy house rental upon request, and then leave it at my house until someone else rents it out. So it's a party for days. We've had racing obstacle courses, a joust, and many others. I got a pineapple guy. He gets me the good stuff, variously called the sugarloaf pineapple, white pineapple, Kona sugarloaf, Kona white, honey cream, few others. It's a pineapple that's sweeter and, crucially, has lower acidity, so it doesn't hurt your mouth or tongue if you eat too much of it. It's good to have a pineapple guy. For those of you asking how to get your own pineapple guy, you gotta know a guy. And for those asking how my guy gets his pineapple, I don't ask and he doesn't tell. That's the whole point of having a guy. I give him money and he gives me the pineapple. No questions asked. I have a guy who'll spray psychedelic mushroom spores on your property for you. He won't sell you mushrooms or sell or give you spores to place yourself, but he'll come out to your property, find areas where they'll naturally grow, and inoculate the area. I am the guy. The horse splooge guy. My family all own horse ranches and breed, and once at a convention I overheard a woman say she couldn't find a decent paint male to breed her mare to. I stepped up and shared my connection. A paint is a multicolored horse with large spots, typically brown or black on white. They're beautiful and highly sought after. My family has some rare bloodlines that are beloved for their colors and happy, even temperament. Spare computer monitors. They aren't the best quality, but if I ever have a friend or family member that needs a spare computer monitor, I call him up and get one from him, thus making me the computer monitor guy for several other people. A chicken guy. His business cards say chicken rescue on them. I'm pretty sure he's also some type of mobster. Acquiring promotional displays. I used to have a pie guy. He'd come around to my shop and all the shops and businesses in the area. He had savory Cajun pies and sweet pies. He had a few regular choices on hand at all times and also took custom orders. The étouffée pies were incredible. I have a sloth guy. 3 separate family events over the last 15 years. I've called my guy and he's brought a sloth to the party. To reassure people, he runs a USDA-certified wild animal rescue and has had his sloth for close to 20 years. He takes extraordinary care of all his animals. The sloth is not a performing animal. Nobody gets to approach, handle it, or pet it. He simply brings it for a short period of time so that people can see it, and he discusses its life, behavior, and care. He does phenomenal work to protect and preserve wildlife. Many of his animals came to him after being purchased by people who wanted an exotic pet and then quickly realized they couldn't care for it. I have a salsa lady. She's been winning awards for it since before I was born. Sorry everyone, she says she sells out locally and doesn't see the need to ship. I have a mattress gal. She runs a high-end mattress shop and is supposed to dispose of any returned mattresses. I take care of disposal by showing up at the customer's place, bringing the disposal mattresses around to any friends or family in need of a mattress upgrade. I got a sweet $4,000 king bed for free and hauling it because it was a return. Frickin' yes, I worked for a junk removal company for a couple of years, and we had a contract with some furniture companies in the area. If a rich person bought something but didn't like it, we were supposed to return it, but these places didn't actually want used pieces of furniture back then, so we were supposed to put it in the dump. Well, we were already paid to pick it up, and putting things into the dump costs money, so if anyone asked if they could take this piece of furniture into their own house, the answer was always yes. Furnished my entire house and parts of friends' houses in my early 20s this way. I've got a guy that will F up your life. Feel free to ask for his number. I have a fat guy. If I need to get fat, I call up the fat guy and I get some. He did chest reductions, tummy sucks, and such. Fat has a lot of stem cells. I used to have a brain guy. I do medical research, by the way. I had no idea where that submission was going after the first sentence. But okay, it all came together in the end there. I thought maybe you were a soap maker a la Fight Club or something. Bee guy. If you need a hive removed, he's the guy to call to safely and humanely remove the bees without killing them. I'm a beekeeper. I also have a queen guy who supplies me with new queens. Even better, I keep bees in Brooklyn, and my queen guy meets me in Queens at a Burger King. He sells me a queen in a Chinese takeout container. Great price, too. I have an illegal cheese and jerky lady. She owns a farm that sells legitimate animal products farm to table, but she also makes cheese and jerky on the side and sells it only to people she trusts. In Canada, we have incredibly strict laws around dairy and jerky products. I've got a clam guy. He gets fresh clams in the morning and then walks around town with a cooler on a cart and sells them door to door. I get him business cards for Christmas one year and he made me write down Clam Master on them. He's a character. He does deliver door to door. He'll sometimes sell the majority of his haul to a seafood restaurant near me, but he'll usually hold back a dozen or so for me. First time I met him, probably 7 or 8 years ago, he was carrying clams in a 5-gallon bucket, walking my block. He asked if I wanted to buy some clams, and I said yes, and we've been friends ever since. He later started coming around with a big cooler on a cart, and even had a moped with a tiny trailer for a little bit. He doesn't deliver on demand, but he reliably comes by once or twice a week during clam season, always fresh caught that morning. I work in the props department in film and television. What do you want? I'll get it. To clarify, I'm not actually a prop dealer, I don't sell my stuff. My uncle has a criminal history and now he owns a car business, but he's still in contact with old friends. He once told me if I need something, he knows people I don't want to know. A friend who was a bit of a good girl was doing a sociology project and hung out with a local substance lord for a bit as part of it. When illegal things were happening, he'd tell her to leave for a while. He ended up really taking a shine to her, and at the end of the project, he gave her his number and said if she ever needed anything, to call him. A few months later, she called him just to say hi, and he yelled at her not to call unless she needed something done to someone. Being a good person with a connection to organized bad people just blows my mind. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I am the bird feeder guy for a very wealthy man. When he's on vacation, I'll go in the morning to fill up the feeders and at night to take them down. Since a lot of people are asking, we take them down at night because of the raccoons and skunks. I have a guy who knows how to shake vending machines in just the right way. Most schools bolt the machines to the floor, but I have a sneaking suspicion the faculty are putting this off so that they can get snacks too. I've literally caught the coaches stealing honey buns. I have a tamale guy. Everyone should have a tamale guy. Oh, my tamale guy ghosted me. I'm not sure what happened, but he used to deliver like 24 tamales every few weeks and it was amazing. I live in Canada, so it's hard to find a good tamale. I had ordered my usual and he said it'd be by the next day. I never heard from the guy ever again. I have a guy who'll diagnose my weird ailments, even if he's planting pumpkins, cleaning out a chicken coop, or nursing injured birds back to health. I've even sent him pictures at 4 AM of the horrible conjunctivitis that I developed over a 12-hour period, and by 8:30 AM he delivered a prescription of antibiotic eye drops to my house. That sounds a lot better than the doctor's online portal where they'll tell you they'll get back to you, sometimes within 2 weeks, and then just tell you they can't answer your question but you should use the online tool to schedule an appointment. Ugh. I just have one guy for any strange thing I'd need to do or want to get. Streamline. Basically my guy. This dude that I buy seasoned chicken wings from. He runs a shawarma shop and he makes things with the same spices. Holy smokes are they good. I have a wine guy. Literally has over 10,000 bottles and acts as a broker or dealer. He has fun stuff and can get things at a much better price than anywhere else. I don't know if it's the strangest, but definitely one of my favorite go-to guys is my chicharrones guy. That's like pork rinds. He's also my drywall and painter guy, but I reach out more frequently for his homemade chicharrones. I have a good friend who's a urologist. As middle-aged men, our group of friends has asked him many a question about the male downstairs area. Oh my god, it's finally my time. This isn't my guy, but still relevant. I'm a teacher. When I was doing my student teaching, it was at a school with a very high socio-economic student body, and I just couldn't relate to them. One day a kid comes in all upset and I thought, oh, a chance to connect, and I asked him what was wrong. He replied that his dog just wouldn't stop barking and it was ruining his life. I was like, okay, but I still wanted to connect and I was like, oh, that sucks. My dog is really old and has a bad back. He immediately sniffed and wiped the little tears from his eyes and said, hang on, I've got a guy. He pulled out his $300 Prada wallet from his back pocket and handed me a card. He said with the most serious look on his face that this was, quote, the best doggy masseuse in the business, as if A, there was more than one guy in that field, and B, it wasn't his parents that employed this man, but the 5th grader himself. I just said, thank you so much, and walked away flabbergasted. Antiques, of all sorts. Pictures from the early 1900s, typewriters, telephones. You name it, you want a very specific type of pencil from the 1980s? I got just the guy for you. I wonder how one becomes this sort of guy. Is it just a dude who's really into antiques, just finally realizing his dream job? Can you live full-time on it? Just so many questions. I know a guy who'll mold your downstairs area and cast it in the metal of your choosing. That's his specialty. He does other stuff like jewelry and general handicrafts, but he's happy to be known as the metal crotch guy. The guy's a character. I'm sorry to break your hearts, but he primarily works with women's parts. He's done some eggplants, sure, but mostly just friends or local adult movie stars. If he's to be believed, he's molded around 1,000 hoo-has. I personally think that it's probably more like 200, but I don't know him that well. I've got a serious egg guy. It's a 14-year-old kid that lives just outside of my city. His dad wanted to teach him about budgets and business, so he bought him a few chickens, and the kid used his allowance to buy food and a chicken coop. Now he has to take care of them, pay for and collect and sell eggs for profit that goes back into upkeep and food. And he's making a killing selling below market value. $2 a dozen for farm-fresh eggs. He sells to his entire school and church. He's grown his operation to be massive and has hired on a couple of friends part-time to help. Did I say he's 14 years old? You want fresh eggs? I know a guy. You want perfectly legal and giftable Mary J grown from a guy's backyard? I know the same guy. Building custom Star Wars-themed cat towers. I have an ATST and might be getting another one soon. She doesn't have a website or build anything for sale, it was more of a favor from a friend. Also, it's enormous and heavy and wouldn't really be feasible to ship even if she was willing to sell them. I know a really good worm guy out of Pennsylvania. A mink smuggler, as in live mink, that I raise from babies. He smuggles them out of fur farms. I'm the computer guy for a lot of people, but the problem is they think that means I know everything about anything computer-related. I don't do social media except for Reddit, and I can't tell you why your Facebook account is screwed up. I have a guy for eggs that sells good quality farm-raised eggs for cheap, and a guy for mushrooms, the actual eating ones. He's actually an agrarian engineer with a postgrad in something related to mycology and mushroom farming. Honey and beeswax. Helped him make a few bee boxes over one weekend, and he gave me 5 pounds of the most delicious gold I could have ever asked for. Turned that into mead that I shared with my closest connections for Christmas one year. It was the best alcohol I've ever had in my life. I want it so badly again, but I need his honey first. For a while, I was a bunch of people's "my friend got kicked out by their parents for being queer and needs somewhere to stay" girl. I have an argument guy. Doesn't matter what side or what subject, he'll happily argue an opposing standpoint and do it pretty well, no questions asked. I have a chemist guy, I'm not joking, and it's useful given my line of work, but more fun outside of it. FYI, household chemicals are fun. Don't mix them. Lastly, I've got a real gal. Always tells it how it is, even if I don't want to hear it or acknowledge it. She's the most useful out of all of them. I have a compost guy, and I am the chicken guy. I have a cheese gal. She makes the best pistachio cheese logs and a particular Gouda. It shames me to say that I also have a separate Brazilian cheesy ball guy. I have a sausage guy that sells me cold, pickled sausage in anti-static bags. I work in the adult favors industry, and I used to have a guy pay to come and clean my cat litter in a silly little party hat. I have a pig guy. Years ago, my friend hand-built a large smoker big enough to fit a whole 100 to 125-pound pig inside. Once or twice a year, we team up and we do an all-day pig roast for our friends and family. It's super fun. Over the years, I've made a reliable connection from a local pig farmer who'll sell me a fresh cleaned pig carcass and we cook it up. I have a kielbasa guy. What do you want this week? Smoked or fresh? Extra garlic. I got some nice jalapeno and cheese just made. The good cheese. I'm out of Slim Jims though. Don't say nothing. I got kishka coming in next week. Both the red and the white. Pierogies. I used to work at a dry oil field in the United Arab Emirates. There was a guy who'd sneak you booze, usually burying it in front of your trailer. In my hometown, there was a beef jerky guy. He wasn't my guy or anything, but he was a guy I knew where to find. Always a basket of homemade beef jerky with a plastic light-up bulb to display the goods for sale. Usually very fatty jerky too, if you're into that. Oddly enough, yakitori. I have a buddy I met years back who just loves making yakitori. He's actually taken gigs at bars where he'll set up a yakitori grill in the back and start cooking. It's nice, simple, straightforward, and quite cheap. This guy just loves manning the grill, and I could message him pretty much out of the blue, ask where he's at, and get some yummy chicken skewers. I love yakitori guy. It's occurred to me that people like this guy are the culinary or supply alternatives to guys who do music or theater for fun. They're putting in a ton of work and making no money to do the thing they love and be the center of attention while doing it. Not a bad way to spend your spare time. I used to know a Moon Knight guy. Huge fan and had every appearance, including promotional stuff, house ads, and Sienkiewicz art in fan publications. And knew chronology and history by heart, with enough duplicates that he probably sold every single one of them twice over. I have a VR adult movie guy. Spends hours a day playing those things. While I haven't tried it yet, I've been informed he's the man to talk to. I won't enter his house, though. I have a guy that can get you whatever guy you need. Mechanics, plumbers, dealers, pig vets, war vets, you name it, it's a cool away. Hot peppers. The other day at the pub, I thought I met a guy who could get cat meat for $50 a pound. Clean, no worms, good to go. His kids love it, so he does it all the time. Even his farm dogs love it. Okay, so what the frick, right? Turns out the drunk motherfricker meant he buys cats from the pound for $50, dewormed them and kept them as pets. Oh, his kids and dogs love playing with them so much he now has 5 and has rehomed 4. So he went from a monster to a hero in 3 sentences. Umbrellas. My dad works for the CTA here in Chicago, servicing buses, and if I ever need an umbrella, I can just go to him because he finds so many of them that people accidentally leave on the bus. What was your big, oh no, moment in a surgery? I was doing a corneal transplant when I had the oh crap moment. During surgery, I cut off the patient's own cornea and replaced it with a new donor cornea. During that moment when the host's cornea was off, but before I could get the new one on, there's literally nothing on the front of the eye except a tear film and aqueous humor. Anyway, the patient takes that moment to start emptying their stomach orally. The reason we tell everyone to skip food and drink is that they don't aspirate in case they throw up. This patient lied about eating breakfast and started just chucking it up everywhere. The eye is still open sky at this time. Everything inside of the eye can now become outside of the eye. And she's buckling and blowing chunks everywhere. Those in the know will say this is not good. Those really in the know will say, oh crap. Anyway, I had to grab the new cornea and start stitching as fast as I could on a patient actively chucking up. I used 10-0 nylon sutures which are thinner than an eyelash. It turned out okay, but not great. Don't lie about eating breakfast before surgery, folks. I work in the operating room and I've seen some pretty interesting things. First day on the job, the surgeon was doing a lap sleeve gastrectomy. During this procedure, a medical device is used to cut and staple the stomach simultaneously. However, in this case, the medical device failed. The stomach was cut open, but the staples never engaged, which left the patient with an enormous gash in the stomach. The surgeon ended up finishing this part by hand. There was also the time I got called into the room to ensure the laparoscopic camera was working and able to record. This was a 6-hour cardiac procedure and was nearing the end, so I knew I was about to see something good. The surgeon pulls out some kind of growth from the inside of the guy's heart. This thing was the size of a chicken wing. It was growing through his valve and I'm honestly amazed they were alive. Supposedly, the only symptoms were shortness of breath. During a C-section for this poor mum who had been in labor for hours, baby would not come out of the hole we'd made, so more pressure was applied to the fundus, which is the top of the uterus. Suddenly, whoosh! Baby zooms out like a torpedo, covered in lubricating vernix, zips over the surgical sheeting, which has the texture of a slip and slide, and almost rockets straight off the table. The baby's foot was caught by the reg, who whipped her up in the air upside down like in old cartoons, but almost dropped her again due to the gloves and vernix. Thankfully, the midwife was ready with the towel and caught the baby to wrap her up. Mum and Dad seemed to think this was normal practice and didn't notice, but me and my colleague just stared at each other with a look of absolute horror. It still makes me shudder to think how close that baby was to hitting the deck head first. Never happened before or since. Well, just reading that took a couple of minutes off my life, I reckon. I didn't realize that women could fire off their offspring like missiles under the right circumstances. Is this more or less exclusive to C-section births, or can it happen during natural birth as well? When I was a new RN working the ICU in a large teaching hospital, I came into work one morning to a patient that was admitted during the night, intubated, like with a breathing tube in, and sedated, with a Foley catheter, a tube in their wee-wee hole, and everything like that. Long story short, we took the breathing tube out, called extubating, that same shift, and he was completely alert and oriented. He was an end-stage renal patient, meaning his kidneys didn't work and he needed dialysis, and was only in his late 30s. Said he never made urine anymore and didn't need the Foley catheter, so he wanted it out because it was hurting. Now, the catheter bag had been empty my whole shift, which is normal, seeing as how he didn't make urine anymore. And this hospital had a nurse-driven Foley removal policy, meaning while we needed a doctor's order to insert one, we could remove one at our discretion, unless a doctor specifically put in orders not to. This patient had no such doctor's order, so I went to remove the catheter. They're held in the bladder by a balloon on the end of it that's inflated with 10 milliliters of saline. I de-inflated the balloon, removing 10 milliliters of saline, and pulled it out. As soon as the catheter left his member, blood started pouring out in heavy streams. Turns out the nurse who placed it on admission hadn't advanced it far enough since there was no urine production to indicate correct placement, and then had inflated the balloon while still in his urethra, causing trauma. It wouldn't stop bleeding. I had to hold this man's eggplant shut to put pressure on it, while my coworker paged the resident who came and looked at me with pity as he told me to just keep holding this 30-something-year-old man's Johnson in my hands to staunch the blood flow until urology could get there to assess. It just kept gushing blood every time I eased up to check. For over an hour total, I held this man's grass snake and tried to make polite conversation until the urologist arrived. When I was younger, I had a rather complex external fixator, like a cage, applied to my leg. It had 3 rings, 2 large 360-degree rings around my leg, one in the upper middle of the shin, one on the lower, which had humongous rods to keep the cage fixed to my leg, and then a third one which was a horseshoe ring kind of thing around my ankle, which threaded all sorts of pins through my ankle, each pin set in a certain way. The point of this external fixator was to relocate and fix the positioning of my ankle so it wouldn't be so screwed, basically. I have a birth defect of clubfoot. A lot of bone got removed before the fixator was put on, so this way it could all grow. It was a 9-hour surgery, and my doctor, who I won't name, was pretty chuffed with himself after seeing it was all installed on my leg. That was until he looked closer. Those pins I spoke about before, with the numbers on them, almost like those sizing things on cheap coat hangers, were all colored and numbered, set for my dad to do every morning and night. He was looking at the pins and the numbers. He glanced away and looked back with a stressed face on. After a few seconds and a slight hand-on-head gesture, he whispered, "Crap." In his mind, he'd organized the pins in an incorrect way. He was stressed beyond his mind for a few minutes. He was worried he'd screwed everything up. Luckily, he hadn't. He just needed to move 1 or 2 numbers. 1 year later, 8 months after the frame was taken off, which was in for about 6 months, I ended up having my leg amputated. The surgery didn't work how we wanted it to, or at least how I wanted it to, which we were sort of expecting. The goal was to get me walking. The amputation got me running. Bear in mind, the amputation was my call. I was 12 when it was done. Best decision I ever made. 5th year resident here. There are lots of bad oh crap moments throughout training, such as necrotizing soft tissue infections or takebacks for bad complications, or deaths during cases. However, I'd like to share a recent positive oh crap moment. 15-centimeter kidney tumor with thrombus into the vena cava. Big incision, great exposure of the vasculature and the tumor. My attending and I are dancing around the aorta and vena cava. We're able to feel the tumor thrombus in the IVC. I was expecting that we'd need to cut and clamp the vena cava to get all the cancer out, but my attending literally squeezes the tumor out of the vena cava back into the renal vein and then has me tie the renal vein off so the tumor doesn't slip back into the vena cava. The patient went home in like 4 days, margins were negative and they're still doing great. First time I felt like, oh crap, I'm a surgeon. Surgeon here. I've dealt with loads of morbid stuff, but one thing that made me stop and go, oh no, was a conversation with a young patient who had a perforated colon from a diverticular disease, which is common wear and tear of the colon. He was one of the youngest patients I'd seen with this condition, and certainly the youngest with a perforation so bad as to require an operation. When I was counseling him on the operation, which involves removing the perforated part of the colon and giving him a colostomy, he told me his biggest concern was how he was going to do it in the butt with his same-sex partner. He'd only have a small stump of rectum left inside, which would be at risk of perforation with any force applied to it. It really made me think about the implications of the surgery we do. The operation was the easy part. I was the patient. I had a liver transplant and was having an ERCP done to place a new bile duct stent. Well, apparently my anatomy is different than normal and my lungs go more down on my sides. So he accidentally caused a nick, which caused a hemothorax. So when I woke up, I couldn't breathe. They did an x-ray and had to do a chest tube. Eventually, I was so exhausted I asked to be vented, so he vented me. Apparently he cried. He felt so bad about it all. But it wasn't him being malicious or negligent, it was just an accident. My uncle is a respirologist and was supervising, sitting in on a lung surgery to remove a tumor. Turns out the tumor was a ball of roots. Some kind of seed had gotten into the patient's lungs and started to grow. Husband went in for a routine colonoscopy, and as they were prepping him, an anesthetist asks him if he's a ginger. My husband tells him, yeah. When he was a kid growing up, he had fire engine red hair, though it's faded to more of a strawberry blonde now. The anesthetist laughs and says, okay, gotcha, we'll give you the redhead dosage, and winks. Well, my husband thinks it's a funny, until he wakes up at the tail end of the procedure, pun intended, and the doctors are just chatting it up and what have you. Turns out it's not a joke and redheads have some kind of natural block to anesthesia. The guy had given him the max allowable dosage and he still woke up. It happened a couple of years later. They gave him ketamine and some other crap to knock him out to get wisdom teeth out when he told the dentist about the colonoscopy thing. He still woke up at the end of that one too. Okay, so now this video has traumatized every redhead who might have a surgery in the foreseeable future. At least now you're aware. Although, to be fair, the surgeons in this story were still aware and stuff really went awry anyway. Oof. When I was in pharmacy school, I was doing my internal medicine rotation in the final year. My preceptor and I were doing med reviews in the ICU when one of the pulmonary docs was basically like, hey, you want to see something cool? They were trying to extract a foreign object from a guy's lung in one of the rooms. So we went in and watched. About 6 people in the room, tube down the guy's throat, little grippers at the end, 2 doctors watching a monitor and trying to control the grabbers and get it like a claw game. I watched them for a bit, then after a while I lost interest and went back to what I was doing. Then a few minutes later I hear, got it, cheers from the room. Oh, it's a tooth! The guy aspirated his own molar. Doctor walked out with his trophy in a jar and it was completely intact, tooth root and all. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I heard an oh no moment as a patient on the operating table. A couple of years ago, I was in labor for 28 hours, pushing for 6, when my child started showing signs of distress. He had a slightly elevated heart rate and the makings of a fever. My midwife at the hospital told me the doctor was coming in to check to see if a vacuum assist could help. She checks me and immediately stands up with blood on her hand and says we're going to the OR now. At the time, I started feeling that zoomed-out tunnel vision, which I know for me is shock. I had anxiety, but figured she knew what she was doing. She did. We got to the OR 8 minutes later, then they opened me up. I heard the surgeon say, oh no, look at this. They saw blood in my catheter bag and upon fully opening me up found out my son was actually trying to come through my uterus. He had ruptured it. They got my son out. Those moments where he was stunned and not crying were an eternity. He cried and was born a completely healthy baby. After I woke up and was back in my room, the doctor came in and told me what happened. I knew a ruptured uterus sounded bad, but damn, I googled and started having a massive anxiety attack. A ruptured uterus is an extremely rare and so very dangerous and often fatal thing. I read from the time it happens, you have about 15 minutes before both parties are no longer alive. When I went back for my post-C-section follow-up, my midwife let me know, as a practice that's been around 35 years with over 30 midwives and doctors, they'd never once encountered that, and it was such a big deal for them a few days after my birth that they all got together to discuss my case. I was so incredibly fortunate I chose to go into labor in that hospital, that the doctor just knew from my vitals and baby that something was off. They just didn't know until they got me open. I can't even tell you how grateful I am for Dr. S. You saved my life and my son's life, and our family will forever be grateful. So this was a military dentist. Yes, they put me under and no insurance was involved. Not sure what they used for anesthesia. Anyway, wisdom teeth removal, all 4 impacted, got to break out the heavy hardware. I was knocked out. Didn't even know the dentist entered the room. I wake up, but unable to move. Just eyes open, awake, but my limbs won't react to my brain. I can feel the dentist hammering a chisel into my tooth to break it for extraction. My jaw is just coming undone on every hit. Yes, I could feel pain from the impact, but not nerve pains in the actual tooth. My eyes are wide open, jaw even wider with some evil metal contraption. I'm staring at the assistant, begging for her to see me, and after about a dozen hammers to my jaw, she glances over and drops the suction, jumps up and shrieks. The dentist stops to look at her, then looks at me, and I see him say, Oh crap. Next thing I know, I'm waking up post-surgery. That was the stuff that nightmares are made of. My "oh no" moment was 8 years after finishing medical school and deferring student loans through residency and fellowship, and then realizing that I was closer to 40 than 30 with over $200K in student debt. Just a resident nurse here. I was working in the ER and had a patient brought in by her husband. Apparently, the woman had fallen a week prior and injured her face, but refused medical care. Her husband finally forced her to come in. As soon as I see the wound on her face, from across the room, I think, that does not look like any wound I've ever seen. I approached her and realized maggots had infested the wound and were eating the rotten skin. A really simple and quick fix, but I can't imagine her living conditions. I had an ingrown toenail. It was supposed to be a quick fix. I was 14 and had my mum with me. They let an apprentice do the surgery and he just goes, Oh no. The doctor in charge just laughed and said, No risk, no fun, right? Turns out they messed up my toe and I had to have 4 more surgeries to correct it. I cried. When I was in med school, there was an oh crap moment for everyone, including the surgeons, anesthetists, nurses, and students. They were prepping a patient for surgery and put him under, and the nurse said, Okay, he's out, before they were about to start slicing him open. The patient had just enough strength to look over and say, No, I'm not out yet. Everyone laughed it off, but if the patient hadn't done that, it could have ended so badly. I'm a scrub nurse. During a lab nephrectomy, urologist mistook the abdominal aorta for the renal artery, placed the staple gun on the aorta, did not wait the recommended 30 seconds before slicing, cut the abdominal aorta clean in half, patient immediately crashes, activate massive transfusion protocol, and the patient was somehow alive when they went up to the ICU. Definitely our worst, oh no moment. When I was a surgery intern, I was pulled from doing scut work to help out in a crap show of a case. One of our Professor Emeritus was in surgery and doing a simple liver biopsy on a patient and then nicked her hepatic artery. The biopsy was for a recurrent tumor and the patient had been on chemoradiation. What all that basically means is that the patient has a hole in a major artery and her tissue has the consistency of toilet paper. Every time they tried suturing the hole, the tissue just breaks apart, leaving a bigger, more leaky hole. Pretty much all hands were on board. The chief residents were scrubbed in, the seniors were literally squeezing blood bags into the patient's veins, and us interns were runners, going back and forth from OR to blood bank to transport blood and plasma. We ended up transfusing over 40 units, 12 liters of blood, so the patient lost over 2 times her total blood volume during that surgery. A vascular surgeon eventually swooped in and did a rather slick patchwork that fixed the problem. Even better, the patient was like a daughter to the surgeon. He had literally saved this patient's life several times already, and they got really close over the years. She'd even named one of her kids after him. The poor guy broke down a few times during the surgery and was convinced he'd just killed this lady. The chief residents had to take over a few times when he was just mentally not there. That was his final surgery. He retired the next day. Hell of a way to end a surgical career. Good God, that is indeed not a fun final day of work to have, and not a great lingering memory to fixate on when you presumably have decades of saving people in your past. I hope he got counseling. I work in cardiovascular, and I can think of a couple. In my 8-year career, I've had 3 patients start moving their arms in the middle of open-heart surgery. One of them even tried to sit up. The surgeon was literally pushing the patient's shoulders down and yelling for anesthesia to give the patient something. Another time, a simple pericardial window. For different reasons, sometimes patients can have extra fluid build up in the pericardial sac that surrounds the heart. The surgeon made a small hole and stuck the sucker in to suction the fluid out and to make room for the heart. He stuck the sucker in too far and struck it through the ventricle. Blood shot out of the small hole just below the sternum. He had to quickly open up the patient more under the ribs so he could stick his hand in to plug the hole with his finger. We had to call another surgeon in to help quick crash onto the heart-lung machine. During my 3rd year of medical school, I was stitching up the wound after surgery, and the anesthesiology nurse woke up the patient too early as I was making my last stitch. and I felt the patient moving her arm and trying to sit up. Patient was still covered in surgery draping and cables and still intubated. Luckily, most people don't remember much from the first moments after waking up, but I got quite nervous from the patient starting to move. Not a surgeon, but when I was in nursing school, I was observing a tonsillectomy when the power went out. Everything switched over to the backup generators except for the suction, which is incredibly important for any surgery, but particularly in the throat. There's an aspiration risk, you see. They ended up having to connect a giant syringe to a length of suction tubing to suction manually while someone went to the other side of the buildings to find portable suction. Luckily, ours was the only theatre that had started operating that morning. My mum had to have a kidney removed due to her waiting for almost 2 years to go to the doctor about a pain in her back. The doctors found it was a large kidney stone and that her kidney was infected and had lots of gross pus shutting it down. After draining the fluids through tubes over the course of a month and a half, she was finally ready for surgery. Cue last Wednesday, the day of the surgery. She was ready to be finally done with it. They removed the stent put in and the tubes no problem. Next was the kidney. And here comes the oh no moment. As they get ready to remove the kidney, there are complications. The kidney's infection had spread to a portion of her lung and a major artery, making them about as fragile as toilet paper. As the surgeon removed the kidney, a hole was torn in the lung, and even worse, the artery was severed. At that point, it was a race to save her life and stabilize her. I don't remember much about how they fixed her up there, but they had to fly her to a different hospital and have a heart surgeon fix the severed artery in a more permanent fashion. Anyway, the heart doctor saw the grave situation and said she's got a 1% chance for her to make it, but he did such an excellent job that my mum is still alive and getting stronger each day. The moral of this story is, if you have insurance and are experiencing pain, go to a doctor as soon as you realize it. It might save your life and also some doctors from an oh crap moment like this. Not mine, but my father's. He told me this back when I was 10, so I'm sorry if it doesn't fully make sense. He had a 21-year-old patient that needed to have a penectomy. He had cancer of the downstairs area. There were 2 oh crap moments for this. The first is a common thing. He wasn't fully asleep. The second, however, is funny and humiliating. They were about to start the surgery. Suddenly, one of the nurses that was there suddenly threw up and left. A test later, and boom! She got knocked up. Halfway through the surgery, the other nurse leaves for a call about her father. My dad's just standing there, a half-ruined manhood in his hand. He calls for help and is just standing there, a man's pride and joy in his hand for 30 minutes. I was having surgery on my chest to remove what they suspected was cancer. It was benign, but either way, I woke up during the surgery and I looked up and saw 4 people with scrub caps on staring down at me. I looked at my exposed mammary gland in pure horror, and that's all I remember because they knocked me back out. It still makes me want to chuck up just thinking about it. I was only 13. I was around 13 or 14 and undergoing gallbladder removal. Almost unheard of for someone my age to have gallstones bad enough to need one. But anyway, I was extremely underweight and sickly. The anesthetist gave me an adult dose of anesthesia and knocked me out for about 8 hours, when it took the surgeon about 40 minutes to complete my surgery, so there was a lot of panic that day because nobody could wake me up. And I was angry when I woke up because I couldn't feel my left arm with the IV in, and I really needed to pee. I tried to get up to go to the loo and ended up on the floor instead. They also got me a potty that I refused to use. Introverts. What social interaction takes your battery down to 0% instantly? Oh, easy. Anywhere where there's loud noise or a lot of noise. I travel a lot in my work, and it often includes staying in a remote city for 2 or 3 days, doing full work days at a customer's facility, and then coming back home. My survival techniques are hotels. I find them calming, as they're like airports. You've seen one, you've seen most of them. I got sent to a remote facility, but the customer's liaison guy invites me to their home instead. I politely decline, and I try all of the excuses in the book, but he's not taking no for an answer. Eventually, he starts to get insulted, and my boss tells me we kinda need this deal and asks me to go. After the flight, I get picked up and we do a full day at the facility, then we go to the guy's house. They have 2 children who are hyper and think I'm there just to play with them. I try my best to show happy face, but internally my battery has already been dry for a long time. Finally, the kids go somewhere and I think I have some time off, but now the guy offers me a beer. Okay, I tell him I've been trying to distance myself from alcohol, but he still drinks a couple of beers and becomes annoyingly talkative. At this point, I'm screaming internally. It's around 9 p.m. and I see this as a good time to go. It's been a long day. I think I'll go check my email and stuff and go to sleep, and I head upstairs, which has my room. I hear them talking. The wife is telling the guy that I might see them as bad hosts if he leaves me alone. The husband, however, wants to drink more beer, so the wife comes up. To my horror, I have absolutely nothing in common with her. She starts talking about their kids and goes on for over half an hour of oversharing the details about their life, while my brain has already frozen from the whole situation. Finally, I get to sleep, and I get woken up over an hour before my time, as apparently the family has super long breakfasts where they just slowly eat and chat about stuff. I have zero energy left from the previous day, and I just stare into the void, while the whole family watches a stupid cartoon and they deeply analyze what's going on. I'm supposed to be having 2 to 3 more days of this, but I call my boss when I get a break and I tell him I can't take this anymore. He now realizes I'm not joking and arranges an emergency job for the next day. So after the second day is done, we agree that the finishing touches will be done remotely now that the hardware's installed, and after the day I finally head back to the airport. My host is noticeably upset, and on the way to the airport he tells me he had their relatives coming tonight and he had hoped we all could have done something together. In short, my social interaction battery shorts and dies if I don't get a hotel for multi-day on-site jobs. Okay, so the narrator is definitely an outgoing introvert, and I'm capable of batting down the hatches for all sorts of situations. But this household seems like an innavigable nightmare to me. Constant face-to-face contact and questioning, combined with rambunctious kids? Who can deal with that? Also, did they invite you over to save the company money, or are they actually that psychotically social? Hey, let's get a drink, you and me. Sure. And then at the pub, oh, when I said just you and me, I actually meant you, me, and my friend from uni that you don't know, but with whom I go way back and will talk to all night while ignoring you. And then I'll just get lost for an extra long bathroom break, leaving the two of you alone to the conversational equivalent of a head shark screwing a tortoise. Office team buildings, or any employment-related mandatory fun. From an introvert who delivers these sort of team-building exercises, don't worry, the other side is just as draining. Family gatherings with loud music, crowded places, people who don't know how to stop talking. Now imagine being in a crowded place with someone who won't shut up. Arguments can drain me from 100% to 0 real fast. Confrontation in general, I'd say, is my arch nemesis. It's even worse when it's a pointless one. It's bad enough when you're listening to one, it really bums the mood. Never mind when you're put in one personally. Every time I get into one, I always lose and can't get a rebuttal in because I don't know what to say half the time due to stutters that quickly make any manner of gathered thought shatter to pieces. In short, I suck at arguments. When you're at a party where everyone else knows each other, I hate going to parties where I know 1 or maybe 2 people. You want to interact with them but don't want to follow them around like a little puppy dog because you don't want to talk to anyone else. Work. Customer service has made my skin crawl since day 1, but it does pay the bills. Unexpected people at a gathering, or many people coming and going. My in-laws always seem to have a lot of random people living with them, and you truly never know who's going to be at their house until you walk in the door. I can't prepare myself if I don't know how many or which people I can expect to see. My mother-in-law also tends to bring random people with her whenever invited over. Well, they were at the house when we left and they wanted to come too. I hate having unexpected strangers in my house. It instantly takes away the feeling of it being my safe zone. So it's probably not surprising that I don't invite my in-laws over very often. It's extremely rare that I go to their house. They wanted to come too. I guess that's because mother-in-law invited them and told them it would be fine and that you have a more the merrier attitude like her. And that it would be fun. Turns out it's completely awkward, you're angry, stressed and uncomfortable, and the guest is uncomfortable too. And the mother-in-law is oblivious. I'm an extreme introvert, and while I love the idea of meeting new and interesting people, it's hard to do when the group is already familiar with each other and you're just the outlier trying to listen to everything said and read everyone so you can at least try to jump in and act like you're part of the group. But instead, you're just sort of the quiet one for the day unless someone talks to you or you find an opening. Running into an old friend you've grown distant from. Like, do we acknowledge each other and have a full-on conversation? Or do we just do the head nod and move on? Okay, let's go around the room and everyone say a little something about themselves. Now everyone get into groups of 2. Look around the room, everyone is somehow already partnered up in 10 milliseconds flat. Damn it. Going to any store where it's packed. If I see a store or restaurant that's too crowded, I just leave immediately. I just refuse to have to deal with that. One-sided conversations. The first moment they talk over or interrupt and don't say, "Sorry I interrupted what you were saying," my battery just drains instantly. Anything after work. Work is draining enough. The arranged by management after-work activities that are not required at all, but if you don't go you get tagged as not a team player, those kinds of events are the worst. Bonus points if they revolve around drinking and you don't drink. I'm pretty sure my career at my current company is over due to not drinking with the manager after work. Going to places and then more people being there than I expected. Just a couple of days ago, I had plans for me and 2 friends to just chill at my house, and somehow I got roped into going somewhere else with 5 or 6 people. I spent most of the time hanging back on my phone. Definitely when you can't get your words into a conversation. You make an honest effort to be more outward, but people talk over you and you just give up. Why are you shy? Why don't you talk? Why are you shy is a baffling lack of awareness about people's inherent mental blocks that I just don't understand. One of my dear friends has a sleeping problem and was advised by one of his colleagues to just get a good night's sleep to just feel better. It feels like the same amount of breathtaking stupidity. When the really sweet, fast-talking 13-year-old girl from across the street sees me out front and comes over with yet another little bracelet she's made for me, I don't hear well, in addition to being an introvert, and her chirpy little voice is incomprehensible. I don't want to be rude to her and wouldn't want to hurt her feelings over anything in the world, but I don't want to be her grandma, so it's very stressful. Kids are usually very receptive if you just explain what your problem is. I'm sure if she's a sweet enough kid to make you a bracelet, then she'll happily understand if you explain your hearing issue. One-on-one interactions where I'm in any sort of charge. Anytime I'm leading around a new hire or an intern at work and need to take them around all day, take them to lunch, stuff like that. It's exhausting. Being on point and being responsible for another person's experience of their day is just so much pressure. That's it for me too. New trainee day is the worst. There's a stranger, I have to interact with them one-on-one, all frickin' day. I genuinely care about them and want them to do well. I know that their progress depends on me, at least somewhat, which means I need to do well, but seriously, when it's halfway through the shift and I need a break, am I doing my best? Training is usually followed by a one-on-one meeting with a supervisor about the trainee and their progress. Please just let me crawl into a beer. Having to engage in small talk really wears me down. Like 2 sentences in and I'm exhausted. I love deep conversations, but small talk just kills my soul. I've been looking for this, especially when it's an extrovert that can't stand silence. Car rides with them are so draining because you're essentially trapped, and since they can't have silence, it's a constant conversation. I mean, my man, if you drain all my energy, we're gonna crash. Helpful advice that's really just a bunch of judgments of your life choices in disguise. Also, any conversation where someone starts suggesting an essential oil blend will solve all of my problems. It would just take less effort to say, all interactions with my mother-in-law, I guess. I used to have acne like a normal teenager and everyone tried to help me. I never ask for help. First day of a new school. In-laws. When people say something snide and I can't for the life of me tell if they're joking, sarcastic, or serious. Large parties or anywhere with booming music and drunk people. I can handle groups just fine, but all of this loud music and the shouting gets me in 10 minutes. Listening to someone boast. Being on the receiving end of an extrovert monologuing in a social situation where I need to play along or be friendly and engaged for whatever reason. So, why are you so quiet? Basically just being taken to a club or party where I know no one and one of these things is guaranteed to occur. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Someone commenting on how much you talk. Either, wow, talkative today, or Sally sure is quiet. It's like, I was comfortable until you had to start treating me like you were tourists at a zoo exhibit. Corporate functions. I'm on the spectrum, but I've learned how to bullcrap my way through over the years. I manage several teams, and honestly, they don't need much managing. They're so awesome at what they do, so I let them run pretty much autonomously. I clear roadblocks, which I do quite effectively because I have the time to formulate, write, edit, or rewrite any emails before they get sent, but in live group functions it takes so much effort to be on the spot, it's just draining. An overly happy person, to the point where you think they're either faking it or wonder if they are actually that happy all the time. For me, it's the energy. It's hard to be around someone that has really high energy. When I'm at a party with my husband where I don't know anyone, and he has to leave to go get beer or go to the bathroom or help someone else, that's when the nightmare starts. Malls. I hate malls. So crowded and teenagers are usually out there in groups. They're sometimes so loud and trashy, and I get flashbacks to high school. That's the worst. Thank frick for online shopping. Waitresses flirting for tips. Likewise, flirty or demanding customers. For me, right now, it's mostly talking to someone I don't know that well one-on-one. I don't like small talk. I prefer deep discussion of things, and if I don't know the person, it's hard to find a topic to go into a deep discussion about. That's why I prefer to have a few people to talk to at a time, so they can talk about whatever they want to talk about, and I could just add something when I have something to add, instead of having to constantly think about what I had to say next. Mandatory team-building exercises at work. Look, I have nothing against my coworkers, they're so nice, and I like them enough to make chit-chat with them. I don't like them enough to do some stupid team-building activity that just wastes time and is nowhere near as fun as the organizer wants it to be. Going to Walmart. Specifically, Walmart and only Walmart. That place drains my soul. I can go in happy, energetic, and social, and leave wanting to lie down and not be alive in the parking lot while yelling at whoever was unlucky enough to come with me. I think we all have that one store. For the narrator, it's actually IKEA. Maybe it's the fact that I can only go when there's horrifying quantities of families and there's screaming kids in there. Maybe it's the fact that it's a mega drive away, or maybe it's the fact that I have to walk through a fricking maze to get to the one item I actually want. Sorry, folks. Struck a nerve there. Got any plans for the weekend? As well as, Happy Monday. Did you do anything fun this weekend? My wife will tell me, my friend is inviting her husband out to lunch. I want you to meet him. I called out to work the next day because I didn't get my alone time that day on my scheduled day off. I hate that. All the guys in that situation have in common is that we know half of a friendship pair. The funny thing is, neither guy wants to be there. You're just there to keep him out of their conversation. You want me to meet him? Whatever. I have my own friends and I'm not taking applicants. When seemingly benign topics of conversation set people off into outraged rants about how either everything's a conspiracy or how everyone is out to screw them over. And every time you either disagree with them or try to clarify your point, they double down and catastrophize even more. I mean, F me for making small talk. Anyone yelling at me, I just black out and have no idea what I said. Family gatherings, I start blabbering, but I have no idea what I said. Then I feel so tired afterwards, like I've done heavy labor. Being a +1 to my boyfriend. I have a serious face and everyone keeps asking what's wrong. So I have to smile a lot so they leave me the frick alone. Here is the list of things that are setting me on the path to becoming a low-level Batman villain. Screaming kids or babies. They're fine when they're playing or happy. Screaming adults. People who play loud music in public. Large gatherings of people, like in cities and stuff. Full buses and subways. And people who try to interact with me even though I'm wearing headphones if it's not important. When someone I don't like tries to speak to me. That seems really general, I know, but it just makes me feel dead inside. Enjoying quality time by myself and someone decides to invite themselves to hang out, like if I'm playing a game and then they try to teach me how to play. Ugh. I hate people who just drop by. If I wanted you to be there, I'd have invited you. I just stand in the doorway and talk to them and don't invite them in. A sudden, unexpected and unplanned invitation to someone's house or party or whatever. I need time to prepare mentally and such. All social interactions, though that's more my social anxiety doing that. Grocery shopping. For whatever reason, that's the bane of my existence. I hate feeling like I'm holding up the line, feeling people judge me for every purchase I make, then looking awkward, bagging the groceries and taking them home. I legitimately only go grocery shopping when it's dark and raining so that no one's there. And I've gone days without eating anything because I was too anxious of going. Also, hair salons, where for some reason people always expect me to talk to them, and the conversation always ends up at, "So, what do you do? Oh, you study philosophy. Can you even find a job in that field? You're gonna be poor." Do you have a girlfriend yet? No! Just no! Is it really that hard for people to understand some of us just can't attract anyone? Take your platitudes into the deepest recesses of your rectal cavities. There's a beautiful thing called natural evolution, and some people just die alone. That's it. Corporate networking. Going to a crowded place with many children. Tough luck for me, I have a 3-year-old with another on the way. IKEA, especially with someone who just wants to meander idly around. I don't even know why, but I get about half an hour into an IKEA trip, and I get flashes back to a childhood spent largely being dragged by my parents around that blue and yellow Swedish hellscape. IKEA is my personal hell. Good kitchenware, though. Really? I find IKEA weirdly therapeutic, like a create-your-own-adventure sort of thing. Being forced to stay. I'm an extrovert, but nightclubs drain me. It's not really interaction, but simulates it badly. When any elderly family member asks you what you do in life, and you can't figure anything since you're anxiety personified and you just make up some bullcrap. The narrator just tells older family members that he works on computers on the internet, and that seems to at least content the ones who are over 70. If they ask for specifics though, that's on you. Icebreaker activities. The level of hate I have for icebreaker activities cannot be measured. Messing up mid-sentence and messing up mid-sentence and struggling to correct yourself. Pretty much when there's more than 10 people in my vicinity, it's like all the extroverts suck the energy out of me. Being excluded during any activity or conversation, like they can convince you to go with them or do something with them and then they pretty much ignore you the whole time. That makes me want to go home and do nothing. Working with people, or any customer service job to be honest. Interacting with extroverts who are superficial, acting in a winner or loser competition. Everything has to be about them and how great they are. Exhausting. Semi-formal work functions. Watching a movie with family that's about boring crap. And then comes a bedroom scene and everyone pretends they have no idea what's happening. And if I get up to go pee or grab a drink, they insist on pausing it when I was just wanting it to be over. Sitting at a long table at an event. I always end up at an end where there are more people I don't know and it's too awkward to get up and stand down near the end where I do know people or shout across other people to make conversation. Any activity that requires my participation be upbeat and into it. Oh, here we go. First, the hair salon. I have long hair, so I'm there for 1 to 3 hours depending on the service I'm having done. I force myself to talk to my hairstylist so he or she doesn't get bored. And then there's social gatherings with co-workers. I work for the state in different offices, so I know a lot of people, and even though I'm usually quiet, everyone wants to talk to me or be my friend. I do my best one-on-one with people and like to talk about something meaningful instead of chit-chat. Job interviews, especially when they're longer than 30 minutes. When people start talking about me or my life. Groups of people where everyone's talking. That's an instant, I need to leave the room moment. I also have a coworker whose favorite hobby is angrily telling stories about his personal life to my other boss. I think he uses it to vent his frustrations, and they both clearly enjoy chatting with each other. But my god, he just sounds so angry to the point of almost yelling. Nope, nope. Continuing a date with someone that I realize I have no interest in halfway through. The mere thought of having to talk to people. I can't stand pretending that I frickin' care about anything. I just want to die. Whenever someone says, "You're so good at this, how are you so good?" Please just stop saying that to me already. People who start conversations with the sole intent of saying what's in their head at the time and nothing else. Conversations usually imply some level of listening. When someone starts talking to me about your dumb crap they saw on the news, and then trying to get me to agree with them instead of actually talking about it, I lose all hope for humanity. I just end up smiling and nodding and waiting for it to be over. Parent night or other school functions. I'm an elementary school teacher and I'm pretty okay with interacting with the students because it's like a switch I can flip on and perform during the day. But talking with a room full of adults makes me want to die. It's so nerve-wracking and it makes me all sweaty. What's the most morally questionable thing you've ever done? When I was in college, a few friends and I had noticed that on football game days, alumni would pay $10 to park in the driveways and yards of houses next to the football stadium. We found a house that nobody was at and started waving cars onto the lawn. We charged folks and nobody thought to ask us if we actually lived there or had permission to do this. Once we filled the lawn, we took our money and just ran off. We spent the ill-gotten gains on underage drinking. Reminds me of the story of the guy who just showed up at the parking lot and started charging people for parking. Did it for like 20 years and then just stopped showing up one day and everyone wondered where he went. He never actually worked for the building or anything, he just took people's money every day. That guy is my hero. I stole my friend's Lego Shark submarine set in the 3rd grade. He had brought it to show and tell and left it there all week to be admired. I told my parents I won it in a competition. The class searched high and low to no avail, but everyone was none the wiser. After a few days, I started to feel pretty guilty. After a few more, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't even enjoy the coolest Lego set of all time. I took it to school the next day, took it out of my bag when no one was looking, and pretended to find it in a corner. My teacher was definitely onto me. God, I was a little jerk. Jerk or not, you did do the right thing. Your teacher didn't rat you out because she knew all the guilt was killing you. Not only that, but punishing someone for doing the right thing is the best way to discourage children from ever doing the right thing. Not as questionable as the others on here, but whatever. When I was in 3rd grade, I was in Catholic school, and my parents and I went to Berrien's bookstore, which is a Christian store, and I stole a bracelet from there. When my parents asked where I got it, I said I got it from a friend. They called up that friend's mum, and I had to confess everything and bring it back to the store. The best or worst part was that the bracelet said, "What would Jesus do?" I replaced the school time capsule with adult magazines. 8th grade class. And no, I didn't chip up some cement-sealed time capsule. Every year 1 social studies class would get some newspapers, Time and Newsweek kinds of things, that used to be important. Students would write notes to themselves, bury it in the baseball field, and dig it up at the year's end. I wish I could say I knew what happened, because I was a freshman in high school by then. I got the idea from the previous year. Put in some hustlers as well, the real good stuff. We actually loved the teacher. He was a great guy who was a bit pompous. We also did donuts on his grassy front lawn when my friend got his driver's license. I still remember my friend saying, "Cloaking device on," and turning off the headlights as he drove up to his lawn. Ah, the 80s. This does seem to basically have been ripped straight from an 80s hijinks movie. Although, to be honest, a 1-year time capsule does seem a bit pointless. You're all still going to remember what you put in by then. Although, the more I think about it, all capsules of a shorter intended duration than 50 years or so do seem a bit pointless. Oh great, kids from 20 years ago were also drawing pictures with crayons. Color me frickin' mind blown. I used to bartend at a sports bar, and there was this group of tap-out D-bag regulars who were just outright crappy customers. They got handsy with the waitresses, they'd run up $150 tabs, and always complained about what was rung up. They never tipped. Frickin' jerks. Anyways, a couple of them came in on a Sunday night about midnight. It had been snowing like a son of a witch, so the bar was empty. These guys started talking down to me like I was the help, and I just said, "Frick it." I started feeding them Huff and Puff shots, which are Grand Marnier and Drambuie, and telling them they were on the house because you're my best customers. These guys turned the heat way up and could barely walk by last call. When I was closing down, I told them I was calling them a cab. Instead, I call the cops, give them the description of the guy's truck and his tag number, and tell dispatch that they're in the parking lot. I go tell the guys that the cab won't be there for another half hour, and they say, "Frick that," and load up in the truck. They were literally backing out of the parking lot when the cops rolled up. Cop goes to the car and the driver blows cigarette smoke in his face. Classic mistake. Gets yanked out of the car by the cop, and then his buddy decides to come to the rescue with drunk haymakers. Only he's 5 yards away from the cop and it's icy as F. Both of them get arrested, and the driver now rides a bicycle to work. This is why you treat bartenders well, friends. I give 50% at my regular dive, and those girls would watch me murder someone in cold blood and tell the cops that that person attacked me first. They'd also let me wipe the tapes. But seriously, it's worth it to have a bartender on your side, and not just for the free or stronger drinks. This girl in my area, whose family owns a very good restaurant, liked me. I talked to her for a while and ate there for free several times. I had no interest in her. I did it for the food. A friend of mine I met in hospital while receiving chemo treatments did the deed with 5 girls that were friends with each other using the line, "I don't want to die a virgin." He wasn't even a virgin for the first one. When I was 18, I tickled my pickle to pictures of my sister-in-law. I tried to drive a substanced-up rave girl home. She ended up lying to me about where she lived, and after telling me 2 different addresses across town, for a total drive time of 2 hours, I ended up kicking her out onto the street. Morally questionable? Well, about 9 years ago I purchased a top-of-the-line laptop from Best Buy. I also purchased their accidental coverage insurance. I dropped that laptop as a legitimate accident 2 years later, and they gave me a laptop of similar specs. Well, since it was 2 years later, I got a top-of-the-line laptop for that year for absolutely free. I bought the same accidental insurance. Ever since then, I've been accidentally dropping laptops every 2 years and getting a brand fricking new one for $100. I wanted a pet rabbit, but I didn't want to buy one. I wanted to catch my own. I learned that feral rabbits have a 10% chance of survival once a human takes them home. Long story short, I caught 10 rabbits to increase the odds of one of them surviving. Tossing ants into a spider web. I still cringe remembering that. But, I mean, from the spider's perspective, you were doing a pretty nice thing. Sort of like helping a hungry old lady pick out a chicken at a butcher shop. My family was really poor. I was shopping at the local Safeway, and this rude and snobby witch was making my life miserable. I don't remember the details anymore, it was like 22 years ago, but I remember how angry I was at her when I was waiting for my ride to bring around to the car. She ran her cart into my leg in some aisle and claimed it was my fault, and then later she cut in line in front of me with all of her stuff, wrote a check, and then there was some issue with that where she screamed at the cashier or something. I really can't remember. Then she accused me of looking at her in some lascivious manner. She was this really fat, snobby, old Dolores Umbridge kind of woman in a fancy polyester suit. I was so angry at her wealthy, boxed wine-drinking existence, I just snapped. I am not proud of what I did next, no matter how poor I was. It was wrong, I just got swept up on my own poor existence near Christmas. This woman had just left her shopping cart piled high with goodies right next to me while she waddled to her minivan. When my ride pulled up, he asked if both carts were mine. I didn't even consider it. I said yes without thinking. I have never packed a trunk so fast. It must have been $400 in groceries in addition to my normal budget of $80 of food for a week. I got home and my wife was stunned. "Where did you get the money for a whole roast?" I confessed to her. She was shocked, but we ended up having a pretty good Christmas that year. "So you stole $400 worth of stuff from a stranger because you didn't like her. Not cool, dude." When an old dealer of mine got busted while driving, we knew where he kept his stash, so we broke into his house and ganked his stuff. At the time, we justified it as trying to help clear his house of anything incriminating. Ugh. Do you all remember the Xbox 360 Red Rings of Death? Well, they happened to me. I was out of warranty and I was angry. So I went and bought a new one and took it apart and installed it in my old case. Then I took my old one and put in the new case and returned it. I paid with cash so they couldn't track me. I thought I was the man for sticking it to Microsoft. I was at work. I opened the fridge. There was a chocolate pudding snack inside. I don't know what happened, but something came over me and I just took it and hid it in my jacket pocket only to enjoy it a few hours later in the car. I had so much anxiety coming to work the next day, scared that someone was going to want to know where their pudding was. Fortunately for me, nothing ever came of it. I still learned my lesson though. Maybe it's just because it's relatable, but for some reason this story of someone stealing somebody else's work treat actually makes me angrier than the other stories. It's really dumb that it makes me this pent up. I guess the ones about doing things like leaving delirious substance users in the middle of nowhere or stealing $400 of groceries just seem so impossible in my life, but I can imagine getting to the end of a long Monday with an entire depressing week ahead of me and then realizing the one thing I had to console myself in the fridge was gone. I randomly received a $450 projector to my house from Amazon. I didn't order it, didn't pay for it, but it had my name on the box, so I was keeping it. Also, the week before, I ordered a ukulele case for $25, and there was a free ukulele inside, worth $200. I didn't return that either. When I was in 7th grade, a kid told me that since I was black, I had to do what he said. I peed in a super soaker and I sprayed him with it. 7 years later, a different friend was helping me move. He finds the super soaker, pumps it, and pretend sprays me. Unfortunately, there was 7-year-old fermented urine in it, and I got covered. My eyes burned for an hour. Karma is a real witch. Oh, well, I've got a few. In high school, I took a dump in another school's drum case at a marching band competition. Recently, my vacuum cleaner crapped out on me. I went to Walmart and I brought another of the same model and used the parts to repair mine. I put the bad parts together in the new vacuum, boxed it back up, and took it back to Walmart for a full refund. The old vacuum was scratched and scuffed. I kinda knew I probably wouldn't have any problems at the return desk, but I wanted to be sure. Regarding the drum case, though, those guys were just jerks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Very messy situation, but my sister asked me to give her money for substances. She basically said that if I didn't, she'd go and rob to get money for it. She was trying to recover from addiction and had a 5-year-old son. My nephew was living with his dad in another state, but my sister was trying to get to a place where she could get visitation. I really didn't want to get involved in that part of her life, but if she were arrested, she'd have been sent to prison for several years and have had no chance to get visitation, let alone guardianship. I ended up giving her money for substances that night, hoping that I could keep her out of jail and maybe get her into rehab soon. I know now that I was just enabling her, but it just hurt too badly to see her throw everything away. There's some positivity to it. She's now in school, working, and has a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. She's also 2 years sober. I have no idea what would have happened if I'd done things differently. I'm just trying to be happy and supportive of her now. Unfortunately, she still doesn't get to visit her son very much, but she's getting there. For our high school senior trip, our school always went to a ski resort a few hours away. My friends and I decided that we'd drive up instead of taking the bus with some others, because we wanted to bring booze and didn't want to risk not being able to get some. We were underage. Well, word of what we were doing started spreading, and more people came up to us and asked us to buy them booze too and bring it with us. Before we knew it, we had dozens of requests, and everyone was willing to pay us double, even triple the cost of the alcohol. We decided to rent a van because at this point we'd be hauling over $3,000 worth of booze. Unfortunately, we weren't the smartest bunch and started getting a little cocky with this new business venture we'd created. We started going up to all the grads and telling them what we were doing. Soon after that, we had $5,000 worth of booze orders. This one girl, frickin' Jillian, came up to us and asked us to buy her a 12-pack. No problem. The night before we were to leave, frickin' Jillian is sitting at dinner with her family who were telling her the dangers of trying to buy alcohol illegally from liquor stores. "Don't worry, parents," she says. "Some kids at our school are taking orders and bringing it for us." Fricking Jillian's parents call the school and tell them everything. I got called into the office because Jillian had come to me for the order and basically got my butt handed to me. I'd have been expelled if my mum hadn't begged the principal to take pity. And there could have been a criminal case, but luckily for us we hadn't bought the booze yet, so there was no evidence. I took the punishment like a man and never ratted out on my 3 co-conspirator friends. I got 7 days suspension, 3 additional in-school suspension days, and I couldn't go on the grad trip. I also became my vice principal's errand boy for the remaining few weeks, and she made me do random things like help stock the cafeteria, clean up the smoke pit, stuff like that. The entire senior trip got delayed by 2 days. They called a school-wide assembly to tell them our scandalous ways and tell them the dangers of underage drinking. All in all, I got a pretty awesome story out of it and learned only one lesson. Do not ever trust Jillian. In short, created an illegal enterprise for our senior high school trip and almost made thousands of dollars. When I realized that the arcade weighed my winning tickets on a scale to count them, I went outside and added rocks. I went from 1,500 tickets to 8,000 and I got a PlayStation. On the night I was going to ask my ex-girlfriend to marry me, she dumped me for a guy she had dated when she was in high school. The next week I invited her twin sister out for some drinks and we proceeded to sleep together. This might pale in comparison, but I felt pretty bad about it for a while. I work in support services at an elementary school and I deal with a lot of behavioral issues. On a particularly stressful day, I had a first grader in my office because she was being so disruptive that she could no longer be in class without it distracting everyone. Of course, her presence in my office was equally distracting to me, and I was getting more annoyed than usual, especially because this was a kid who was normally really well behaved and was clearly just attention-seeking. After about an hour of her sitting in my office, refusing to talk to me about her behavior, another first grader came in to offer me one of her leftover birthday cupcakes. As she was leaving, she asked if she should leave another one for the other student, the one with the issues. I told her that the other girl didn't deserve a cupcake, and the birthday girl left to continue handing the extra cupcakes out to staff. Behavioral issue girl was visibly displeased. Feeling particularly spiteful and annoyed that day, I unwrapped the cupcake while making eye contact with behavior issue girl, licked my lips and ever so slowly ate the delicious treat. Now, this was a baked by Melissa mini cupcake that I could have eaten in one bite, but I made it last five bites, all while making direct eye contact with the girl. She cried. It was worth it, but in retrospect, it was probably a little unnecessary. I did not use a coaster at a small gathering at the house of a stranger. I once stole my best friend's shiny Zapdos Pokemon card. I went number 2 in my coworker's private bathroom every day after work and I never flushed. She installed a new lock and handle, a padlock on it, which I lockpicked every day and dropped a deuce in. After 2 to 3 months, she went on a tirade at a company meeting about people crapping in her office, and our CEO fired her. Don't worry though, she was a horrible person and fired people because she didn't like them or because of the way they dressed. Scum of the earth. Look, the narrator has got to put it out there that he doesn't condone any of this stuff, and none of you should be inspired by it. But it does have a certain cathartic satisfaction to watch absolute jerks get their comeuppance, doesn't it? On the Am I the Jerk channel, we call the enactors of these misdeeds jerk vigilantes. Subscribe to the Am I the Jerk channel for all your vicarious jerk vigilante needs. Living with my girlfriend for 2.5 years because I needed a roommate to help pay for rent, so I could get a place big enough to set up a small recording studio in. She was head over heels for me and I just didn't care about her at all. I've cheated on her 5 times and told her about the first 2. She told me she just didn't want to know at that point, so I haven't told her about the ones that happened after that conversation. I've warned her from the beginning that I'll never feel anything for her because I have some specifically diagnosed and medicated brain disorders that make me incapable of doing so. The lease is up in August and I'm moving out then. She is a horribly messy roommate, and I'm a neat freak and I'm tired of it. And I got a massive raise a few months ago and I'm fully capable of paying for a place big enough on my own now. I cheated on a girl I didn't really care about who's probably one of the nicest people in the world. I hate myself for doing it, but I was young and couldn't say no to a drop-dead gorgeous ex. I think it just seemed morally ambiguous because, at the time, I didn't think much of the relationship and I knew she'd never find out. So, what difference would it really make? Who would it really hurt? My moral compass has since changed, but morals are a fluid and personal thing. Just because you think something is morally wrong, it doesn't mean everyone else does. I mean, it used to be against social morals to open your business on Sundays. I'm 22, and this is the only thing I actually regret in my life so far. It happened last summer when I'd freshly gotten out of a very long relationship. To say that I was happy to be single is an understatement, and I clung to my no commitments, have fun and be wild mindset throughout this entire thing. I'm a lesbian who met another lesbian through friends at a 4th of July party. There was chemistry, but she told me she had a girlfriend straight away. We texted occasionally. She always initiated it, and though it was always flirty, she mentioned her girlfriend often. I definitely wasn't trying to pursue this girl, though. We ended up hanging out with a mutual friend at a bar soon after. Too much alcohol was consumed, and we hooked up that night. Then we hooked up the next night, and for about 4 more weeks. I don't even know why I did this. It's not like I was insanely attracted to her. I think it was just the first real attention I'd received since being newly single, and I thought, well, it's not like I'm the one in a relationship. And it gets worse. I ended up going to a concert a few weeks later with a small group of people. That girl and her girlfriend were present. I had been doing the deed with that girl the night before. You'd think that I'd feel guilty about being around this unknowing girlfriend, right? No. We subtly flirted in front of her and it was fun. We were all drunk and ended up going to a house party right after. The girl I'd been sleeping with was the drunkest and passed out hard in a spare bedroom. A few hours later, it was 3 a.m. and the 3 people who were still awake walked to my friend's house to crash. Me, my friend, and that chick's girlfriend. No clue why the girlfriend went with us. The girlfriend seems cool and she's hot. I actually was attracted to her that night, which made me feel strange for sure. She seemed to be flirting with me. At first, I think I might just be imagining it because I'm wasted. The flirting was persistent and I admit that I'm loving my newfound attention. My friend goes to sleep in her room and leaves me and the girlfriend to sleep on the couches. This is where it's all fuzzy. The girlfriend eventually came to my couch and we hooked up. We woke up, cuddled, and I was extremely confused. You'd think this chick would freak out, but instead she told me how attractive she thinks I am, and she said that she'd been threatened the last month or 2 of having her girlfriend hang out with me. Rightly so, I mean, frick. I noped out of there and I went home to question my identity. The girlfriend manages to get my phone number and a few days later hits me up again. I hate to admit I slept with this chick for about 2 weeks. Both of these girls were cheating on each other with the same person. They'd be texting me at the same time, and probably when they were with each other. The part of me that I didn't even know existed found some sick satisfaction in this at times, but for the most part I felt like I didn't even know myself. I finally just ended it and cold turkey stopped responding to both. At the time, this felt like the weirdest thing that had ever happened to me, but I know I shouldn't have gone along with it. You definitely are the company you keep, and I felt like a piece of crap towards the end of it. Whenever I think about it, my skin crawls. What's the weirdest thing a parent found out about their child? The first real noises that my baby daughter learned to make, other than crying of course, were growls. We found out in the middle of the night through the baby monitor. The creepiest thing I ever discovered while babysitting was that this 7-year-old had a dead fly pile. He made a game out of catching flies with his bare hands, but unlike normal people who'd just walk away from the scene of the crime, he decided to keep them as trophies or something. So, in the bottom of his closet, he had a little pile of dead flies no one else knew about. I didn't say anything. My 2 nieces were playing with some post-it notes at my mother's house. The younger one was writing little messages on them and sticking them on things. I love you. Hello. Stuff like that. I walked past one of them just to hear the older one quietly telling the younger one to write one to grandma saying you're gonna kill her. I was babysitting 2 kids for my sister, who was the usual babysitter. The little girl was eating and turned to me and says, "We could fit Diva in the freezer." Diva was a Pomeranian. I replied, "But that wouldn't be very nice. Finish your dinner and then you can have dessert." She started eating again and stopped mid-bite. "We can fit Rocky in the microwave." Rocky is an even smaller Pomeranian. I say, let's not do that. It freaked me out a little bit. Why did she want to put her dogs in the kitchen appliances? About 2 weeks ago, my wife was playing outside with our kids, a 2-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. She ran inside to get them some water or something, and when she came back outside, my son had lost all of his clothes and was going number 2 in the driveway. Another one I know is my friend's little brother used to go through magazines and cut out all of the women's chests from all the pages in a magazine and keep them in a plastic bag under his bed that was labeled in black magic marker, the boo-boo bag. I went into my 6-year-old son's room at around 10 o'clock at night when he was supposed to be asleep because I could see from the hallway that he was using a flashlight. Turns out he was undressed from the waist down and had stretched the skin of his little baggie taut and was shining the flashlight through the skin to make his room glow a soft red color. The narrator has to level with you. He's been scrolling through the stories for a while now to try and find a few non-naughty bit related stories, but it's going to be more or less silly kids being totally socially inappropriate from here on out. And let's not judge. Kids play with the things they have at hand, and most of our parents could unearth similar, or worse, stories about us that we've probably repressed. So, with that in mind, my younger brother, when he was about 3, started this game where he'd pretend his downstairs equipment was an automatic weapon. So, you could just be wandering around the house and he'd run up to you completely undressed, screaming, with his equipment in one hand, going, "You're dead." My 6-year-old cousin tried bending and snapping his wee-wee because it was occasionally getting in the way. He's fine. My 6-year-old too. A month ago, he got so angry. I heard him frustrated in his room, and I came down the hall to see what the problem was. He was struggling with his undies, and his little unit was like a tent pole. He was trying to tuck it into his unders, and when I asked him what the problem was, he said to me, "Papa, it won't go down." The innocence. It made me smile. My mum told me a story that I once casually strolled into her ladies' night gathering, carrying a box of tampons, and I handed them out as welcome gifts. I was 5, had no idea what tampons were for, and am male. It was a different brand than she used. When I was younger, I found my mom's tampons and I thought they were bulbs. I decided the only thing to do was plant them in neat rows in the yard. My grandma found it hilarious, and my mom wasn't too happy. My female cousin and her female friend, I don't remember how old they were, but pretty young, they had the amazing idea of playing doctor. Little did I know that this would include shoving sting nettles where the sun don't shine. My parents, sadly, have shared it to me as well as most of their friends. When I was a little kid and was being potty trained, I somehow got the idea that I'd go number 2 like my dog, so I'd go out in the backyard and do it. My family was at our friend's birthday party at their house, and I ended up going out in their backyard, and their dog ate it afterwards. Not a parent, but when my brother was younger, about 4 years old I think, he had his own number 1 and 2 in Play-Doh containers under his bed. My mum found it while she was cleaning his room. He said he was practicing to be a doctor. When my son was young, maybe 3, he was in the backyard playing on this toy. I think it was a plastic horse that you rocked back and forth on. He suddenly stopped and got this weird look on his face and said, "Wee-wee tickles." After a couple of seconds, his face changed to alarm and he shouted, "Wee-wee hurts." I imagine it was one of his first tent pitchings and he didn't know what was happening. My son asked me to get a particular film. It was an 80s film and it wasn't on Netflix, so I started to browse torrent sites to see if there was a copy of it. I click on one of those fake download now buttons and a pop-up opens depicting a girl with her cheeks spread. I close it as fast as I can. "Daddy, was that a butthole? Can I see it again?" My wife and I had a back massager. When my son was around 12, he left the dinner table to go to the bathroom. The ceiling started vibrating 10 minutes later. Our master bedroom was right above the dining room, so I went upstairs to check, only to see him lying face down on the massager, occasionally giggling. Without seeing each other, I just went back downstairs and explained to our dinner guests that we were having an electrical problem. My parents caught my 12-year-old brother with 3-gallon jugs filled with urine below his bathroom sink. When they asked him what it was for, he said, "So I can tell how much pee I make." A few years later, he got arrested for throwing human and dog feces mixed with human urine in balloons at cars. I had one of those life-size walking dolls when I was a kid. My mum was babysitting this little boy. He was maybe 4. He found this doll, which was truly life-size for him, brings it out to the living room and started dancing with it. So cute. Then he dropped it to the ground and started humping it. I believe he may have seen a bit more than his parents thought he did. My son, 5 at the time, announced to everyone at a large dinner party that Daddy's member was long and hairy. Related, my wife works at a theme park where she gives princess makeovers to little girls. One morning she was working on a little girl and trying to make small talk with the child. "Do you have any pets, princess?" "We have a pony," the girl replied matter-of-factly. "Oh, lovely. What color's your pony?" The girl shrugged and replied, "Oh, I don't know. I've never seen it. But Daddy says Mommy can ride it any time she wants to." My wife had to bite her lip to keep her from laughing. My friend's kid asked, "Mummy, how old are you?" She said, 32. "Oh, well that's a good age to die, I suppose." My older stepsister sleepwalked a lot. When I was around 8 or so, I remember waking up lying on my back because I felt something brushing my face. It was her hair. She was leaning over me with her mouth open a little, just staring at me. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever woken up to. I was so scared, I just laid there staring back. Then she straightened back up and left the room. I started crying loudly, and my dad found her peeing in the corner of the living room. That part was funny later, but it took a while before I'd sleep in the room with her again. I mean, that does sound absolutely horrifying. I do not want the ring girl appearing above me in my sleep, thank you very much. Nor to have to clean the carpet in the corner of the room she finished her exploits in. Ugh. My mum caught me whacking it to an adult movie and slowly backed out of the room. I caught her reflection in the TV, but she didn't know I saw her. She's never brought it up. Can't blame her, to be honest. A couple of years ago, I found something strange in my little brother's closet. He was about 8 at the time. You know those large Kool-Aid containers that store the powder? Well, he took an empty one from the recycling pile and filled it with a combination of tap water, acorns from our backyard, leaves, and I think even some bugs. When I found it, he had opened it up after about 3 months, and it looked like some serious mildew had formed. We dumped it, and I found out he was trying to reincarnate one of the puppies my dog lost. I guess it didn't work. There was a girl I used to go to school with, and she told me a story about her sister once. Her sister had an easy bake oven, and the family had some goldfish. One day, the sister decided to wake up extra early so she'd be able to make the family breakfast. Cute, right? Wrong. What she had planned for breakfast was goldfish a la easy bake. Her goldfish died under a light bulb. Rest in peace, goldfish. My daughter cut the heads off hers and hid them under her bed. She had been fishing with my dad and cleaning the fish afterwards, so at least there was a good explanation as to why she had done this. When I was about 5 or 6, I used to make my Barbies have adult competitions and be exotic dancers and stuff. I'm assuming that I saw this happen in movies because I have no idea where else I could have learned about it from, and I also knew the proper names for it, and more often than not, there'd be a huge backstory set up like a "What will happen next?" Pokemon cliffhanger. Like, Stacy is a single mother who needs to take off clothes for money at night and keeps having babies because of her parties. Tonight is the night of the big bedroom competition. Will she win? I'm going to keep my children away from adult movies and songs as much as possible until they're done with stuffed animals. This was me too. My Barbies were constantly doing the deed. Lots of soap opera-esque cheating, all that stuff. I'd put their faces in the crotches of other Barbies and make slurping noises. Also, once in Brownies, we were talking about what careers Cinderella might have had if she hadn't married Prince Charming. All the other girls were saying stuff like nurse or teacher, and I said working girl. My mom was the troop leader, and she was so embarrassed. A friend of mine went out for dinner with his family, which included a 4-year-old boy. Everyone was looking down at the menu to decide what to order. As the waitress approached the table, they all looked up and noticed the boy was standing in the booth with his pants down and both hands pointing at his prominently displayed member. In his best, "Who da man?" voice, he proclaimed, "Good morning, Mr. Johnson." Apparently, he had been waking up with a confusing situation, and this is what his parents said when he asked them about it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Conversation I had with my daughter when she was 2. I said, "What do you want for breakfast, honey?" "Puppy." No, what? "Can I eat the baby?" What? She then proceeded to grab her doll and slam it in the oven. It wouldn't have been so bad if she hadn't screamed, "Shut up," when the doll started crying. Kids are messed up, man. I was going to babysit my friend's younger brother and sister, and the mum wanted me to come over for dinner so they could get to know me better. Before I left, the boy, who was 5, said loudly and cheerfully, completely out of the blue, "When I grow up, I want to beat my wife." His parents were genuinely confused and told him that was wrong. In the few years we were neighbors, I never saw any signs of a bad household, so who knows where he got that from. My parents waited until I was 18 to tell me that as a small toddler, I used to eat the frayed ends of the carpet. I once walked in and listened for a good 30 to 45 seconds of my 4-year-old daughter holding a long conversation where Barbie was leaving Ken because he was a deadbeat, and Ken was alternately pleading and threatening Barbie, complete with name-calling and accusations. Barbie sounded angry but calm. The depth of her understanding of the situation weirded me out. We don't let them watch Springer, and we parents had never fought like that, even in private. My parents did tell me, and they like to remind me every once in a while, telling me that I was always weird. Great. Anyway, I used to play with Barbies when I was 8 or 9 years old. I used to sometimes take their heads off, and other times take all their clothes off, tie their hands behind their backs, and make a sort of chain of Barbies that were hung by their heads. I don't know why I did it, and neither do they. I have no recollection of this, but I'd think it was creepy for my mother to find one day when going into my room. One day, my son, who was 10 at the time, his dad and I were driving home from his basketball game. And my son was telling his dad about this girl who'd thrown 2 basketballs in his face in the game the week before. When telling his dad about it, he described her as an ugly B-word. Before I could chastise him for the language or sentiment, his dad says, "Don't be like that, she could be your girlfriend one day." To which my son replies, "Yeah, then I'll be throwing balls at her face." One of those parental moments where you should be angry and punishing them, but you're just trying not to die laughing. When my mum called out my full name one time, you know that's not good. She'd told me she'd found something disgusting on the computer. Crap. So here's a pretty solid transcript. My mum said, "This is disgusting." I replied, "Mom, all teenage boys are looking at that stuff on the internet. Bob's dad even got him a magazine of it for his 14th birthday. Not like this. This is disgusting." "What did you find?" "You tell me." I'm not gonna do that. Just punish me." And that was it. A stalemate. I've consumed a very wide array of adult material, and I had no idea how badly I'd been busted, and figured correctly she wasn't going to fight like hell to go further down the rabbit hole. To this day, I have no idea what part of my messed up psyche that my mum busted me on. My son is 5. His aunt took him to the mall shopping last weekend. When he came home, he whispered to me, "I spied on my aunt when she was getting changed, and she has the hairiest hoo-ha I've ever seen." I'll be reminding him of that in approximately 10 years. My sister is stalking someone. Don't know who though, so I can't warn them. My son is 2.5, so we have many, many years of creepy ahead. But for now, the other day he was rolling around on the floor in the living room, doing these really weird-looking somersault things. "What you doing, bud?" "I'm trying to bite my eggplant." "Oh, well, be careful." Look, the narrator knows that stuff like this happens all the time with kids, and I'm talking about every kid. I know that it's normal. So why is recording this making me so apprehensive about ever having children? Hopefully it's not discouraging too many of you. I was visiting a friend, sitting in her kitchen chatting, when her 4-year-old boy came into the room crying. I mean really crying, like Santa and the Easter Bunny had just ganged up and beat the crap out of him crying. His face was beet red and tears were streaming down his face. We then noticed that he had his downstairs equipment clasped in his hands and he was squeezing it as hard as he possibly could. He sobbed, "Mom, it hurts when I do this." He continued to cry as his mum and I looked at each other in dumbstruck confusion. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of crying and squeezing, his mum said, "Well, honey, then don't do that." Her son immediately stopped squeezing, paused for a moment, then smiled as he tucked himself away. "Thanks, Mom," he said as he skipped out of the room. One of my 2-year-old twin cousins came up to me one day, and I kid you not, she grabbed me by the downstairs area and pulled as hard as she could, as she yelled, "Naughty!" I was on medication for months after that. One day, I found out my son was getting bullied by 3 other boys. I was going to call the school about it, but my husband told me not to. I can only assume he told our son to fight them. The day after, my son came home from school all smiley. I asked him if the other kids were still giving him trouble, and he just laughed and said, "No, not anymore." Meanwhile, I saw my husband in the mirror. He had his arms crossed, and he was nodding, probably thinking, "Frick yeah, that's my boy." A few days passed, and I thought nothing of it. Then my son got a virus on his computer and asked me if he could use my personal laptop while my husband got rid of the virus. I told him sure and logged him in. He used it for a few hours until my husband got rid of the virus, then shut down the laptop and gave it back to me. Later that night, I decided to go on Facebook and I noticed my son forgot to log out of his account. I know I shouldn't snoop, but I was too tempted, so I looked at his messages. I saw he sent a message to the 3 boys that were bullying him, and I read it. The message was along the lines of, "Hey Chris, did you cry like a witch today because you saw your teeth on my necklace? If any of you screw with me, I'll be adding more teeth." Then he added a photo of this string with a bunch of teeth tied to it. His necklace, I assume. So I found out my son wears a tooth necklace to school. When I told my husband, he just laughed. Typical. Kinda weird, but more just a what the frick moment. I was babysitting this kid for my mum's friend. The kid, Tyler, was like 5 or 6. Anyway, I was chilling with him in the kitchen of this house, and it was pretty normal. All of a sudden, he says, "Have you ever seen anyone die before?" I was a little surprised and creeped out, but replied, "No?" Then Tyler looked at me with a creepy, wide-eyed stare and said, "Just wait." I was kind of frickin' hella freaked out, and Tyler got up and went to the cabinet and opened an airtight jar of peanuts, grabs a handful and starts scarfing them down, making eye contact with me. I looked at him and said, "What are you doing there, Tyler?" He looked at me with the same face and says, "My mom didn't tell you? I'm allergic to peanuts." Fricking great. I drove him to the hospital and he got a shot and everything was alright. His mom said he'd never acted like that before and I'm pretty sure he's fine now. It was crazy though. In short, a kid asked if I'd ever seen anyone die before, then promptly ate a bunch of peanuts, which he was allergic to. When I was younger, I found a Dickie's barbecue cup of toenails, dryer lint, and hardened splooge in my brother's room. When I poured it out to see what it was, it fell out like a scratchy pale strawberry shortcake bar off the stick. I freaked out and left it there on the carpet. Later, he came in and asked me if I'd been in his room. When I asked why, he said, "Never mind. My dad paid me $50 to help recarpet that room." My brother blew his nose on a piece of lunch meat and then ate it. Little boys can be disgusting. I used to babysit these 2 boys when I was 12. They were 5 and 6, one fat, one skinny. Now, normally it's unheard of for a male to babysit kids, but my sister started out babysitting them, and eventually she no longer could, and the mother asked me if I wanted to. They were a very wealthy family that spoiled their kids to the point where they were rotten little jerks. The parents were just horrible at being parents, which is probably why they asked me to babysit without hesitation. Anyways, one day we were in the toy room playing Nintendo 64 and they wanted a different game. So I searched the room for another cartridge and I found my way into the drawer which contained Polaroids of the fat one's downstairs area. Being 12, I didn't realize the possible severity of the situation and I shrugged it off. Well, after I left, apparently the kid had mentioned to their mother that I'd found the pictures. The next time I babysat, the mother casually brought it up and told me they'd taken the pictures for medical purposes, as the fat one had a rash they were keeping an eye on. I babysat a kid who drowned animals, a duckling and 2 baby chickens to be exact, in the backyard pond, to watch the bubbles. His mother told me that, and she wasn't disturbed at all, but seemed to be bragging about his curiosity. I nearly threw up. He wanted to be a cop when he grew up. I had a lot to say about it, and then I wasn't asked to babysit anymore. It happened back when the movie Superbad came out. I was in my room drawing like I usually did. As I was brainstorming ideas, the scene where Jonah Hill drew Johnsons all day came to mind. I wanted to create my own eggplant art, so I drew the biggest, ugliest one I could. It was horribly graphic, and I remember being disgusted with myself, so I folded it up and left it on my desk. I left for the day, and when I came home, it was no longer there. My heart sank. I was on full panic mode. Where the frick is it? I frantically searched everywhere, but I couldn't just ask, "Hey Dad, where's my giant downstairs elephant drawing?" I grew up in a Mormon household for God's sake. Nobody ever mentioned it. I was running late coming home from work one day by a few hours. My wife couldn't get a hold of me and was beginning to worry. Then my 3-year-old son went to the window and said, "I see Daddy in the car." My wife went to the window and no one was there. When my wife asked him where I was, he responded, "He's a ghost," then smiled and walked away. In short, my son told my wife that I was dead and that he could see my ghost. What's the dumbest thing you did as a child out of curiosity? I just wanted to see if my tongue could actually get stuck to ice like in cartoons. My dad found me crouching with my tongue glued to the bottom shelf of the freezer. I think a bit of my tongue was left on that shelf after I pulled myself away. When I was 5, I tried to see if I could fit my head through the bars going up the stairs. I got my head in, but couldn't get back out. My mum called the fire department, they pried me out and gave me a teddy bear. In short, I told all my friends how to get a free teddy bear. I stuck a fork in a light socket to see if it would actually shock me. It did. My friend was trying to stick a paperclip in an electrical outlet during class. He only put it in one socket. It did nothing. Well, I was smart enough at the age of 10 to tell him that he needs to stick both ends of the paperclip in both holes for it to work, and oh boy did he get results. He cried, I laughed, the teacher was angry, and now I'm an electrical engineer working for GE Aviation. I was left alone in the car for a few minutes. I loosened the handbrake while the car was located on a hill. My grandpa had to run for the car and make it stop. If it makes you feel any better, once I pressed the cigarette lighter of my dad's car into my thumb to see how hot it was, the answer was pretty frickin' hot. I stole something small out of a store to see what kind of trouble I'd get into. Turns out I was young enough for them to simply tell me to leave. I stole a lychee from this grocery store and my dad caught me on our way home. He made me return it and apologize. I cried a lot. It was all very dramatic. Cringe. I poured water down a hive of wasps when I was 6. I thought they looked thirsty because the water droplets I gave them around the entrance all got sucked up. Turns out they were just trying to keep their home free of moisture. My grandfather, who was gardening at the time, saw the cloud that came up, grabbed me and ran inside. I still got stung more than 10 times though. My sister, who was a year younger, had been watching me. She went inside and closed the door the moment I poured the cup. She's much smarter than I am. She still remembers the way the wasps slammed against the door trying to follow us in. Yeah, this feels like the kind of thing the narrator would have told one of his younger siblings to do and then watched from behind a pane of glass. I was not a very good child or brother. I sat on train tracks, seeing if I'd be fast enough to dodge the train. After 30 minutes, I got bored though. My short attention span might have saved my life. I smashed one of my fingers with a rubber mallet just to see what would happen. Pain happened. Oh, the classic. I stuck my head through the banister on the stairs. I got stuck and was stuck there until my uncle woke up from his nap and saw me while he was walking down the stairs. If he wasn't an athlete, I don't think he would have been able to pull the metal rods apart the way he did. And of course, I told my mum, well, I got my head through, so I thought I could get it out. Stomped on a cactus barefoot because my cousin told me it was a time machine and that's how it worked. It was not a time machine. I ate a cigarette as a kid because I didn't understand the concept of smoking, but I regularly saw my dad putting cigarettes in his mouth. So, one time when he was in another room, he had his pack on the coffee table and, well, I was hungry. I ate some ants because I saw Baloo the bear do it in the Jungle Book. I donned black face paint because of some older cartoons. I was 5. The family friends I did it for were black. Plus, they liked my impression of those racist crows that appeared in a bunch of Disney movies. I tried jumping over a waist-high fence. It should have been easy. Went for the jump, made it over, but in the process I kneed myself in the face and knocked myself out. I don't know how long I was out for. I rubbed deep heat all over my Johnson. Then I went downstairs and sat at the family dining table to eat dinner. I ate my dinner very quickly that day. I tried to change the TV channel remotely with a butter knife. I must have been sitting on the real remote when I picked up the knife and the channel changed. I was convinced it was some kind of crazy electronic interference I didn't understand, so I tried and tried to change the channel again with the knife. I thought if I concentrated really hard, it would work. It did not. Well, I petted a dead rotting rat, but it was out of love. I started messing around with a deer's skeleton I found. I'd never seen bones so big that you were allowed to touch, and I wanted to bring it home and make my room into a museum. Unfortunately, my mum didn't appreciate me walking into the house with a dead deer's leg. I sharpened my pinky finger using a pencil sharpener, and oh boy, blood was everywhere, I can tell you. We were having a penny race on my friend's parents' hallway wall, pressing a penny flat against the wallpaper and running it across the wall with a finger. My penny slipped and fell directly behind the little plug in the nightlight, onto the prongs. The lights in the entire house flickered and went dark. Blue electricity spidered up the wallpaper and my friend unplugged the nightlight. The lights came back on and where the electricity had been was burnt black wallpaper in the same design. They were grounded and I couldn't come over to their place for weeks. Grounded, pun intended or no? When I was a kid, I liked to put coins in my mouth. Like a lot of children, I liked the metallic taste. My mother would always stop me when she caught me doing it. One night, I was basically home alone, and my mum was at work and my dad was asleep as he worked the night shift. I was in my bedroom and put a quarter in my mouth. The quarter fell directly over my windpipe and I started to choke. I remember being scared because I couldn't breathe. I wasn't sure if I could make it to my dad's room to wake him up, and I was thinking Mum was right. At the last second, as the lights were starting to dim, my gag reflex finally kicked in and I coughed up the quarter. I sat there looking at it, and I vowed from that day forward I'd never put coins in my mouth again. I didn't tell my mum about that for years. I believed that everything that was red tasted like strawberries. I found out that I was wrong after I ate some red wool. I was maybe 5, so I was making instant ramen for myself for the first time without my mum's supervision. I love fire, so I thought maybe it would be cool to play with the Shin Ramyun plastic paper and the fire from my stove. I knew the sink was nearby just in case. The plastic got lit on fire and I was about to bring it to the sink to watch it burn when it drops onto the floor. I sang happy birthday to the small fire on the floor, and it didn't go out until my mum appeared shortly after and doused it with a bowl of water. The floor ended up having burn marks until we remodeled it when I was 12. I put my whole hand on a stove to see how hot it got. Turned out it got really, really hot. Well, I like milk and I like Coke, so let's make some magic. Cue me vomiting for the next 10 minutes. Oh my god, you brought back a memory. I did this too, but with milk and orange juice because I thought it would make an orange milkshake. Ugh. You know, I'd heard that if you stuck a knife in the toaster, it would explode or something, so one day I decided to try it. I touched the top of the toast, not the metal, and scraped it around a bit on the crust, and nothing happened. So I tried it again and again and again. So for a couple of months after that, I'd use that method to see how toasted the bread was. I stopped after I saw my dad pull the lever up manually, causing the toast to kind of fly up in the air, you know? I thought, well, that looks cool as hell, so I switched to that method. That was way more fun because I was obsessed with how high up in the air I could make the toast go. And if I caught both pieces before they hit the ground, I won. So basically, I spent a couple of months playing Operation with my own life on the line. I'm not sure I deserved to be that insanely lucky. This video is making the narrator concerned about just how many common sense things he'll have to explain to his offspring growing up, and which ones he'll miss, causing a catastrophe. Kids really are just on a main quest for self-deletion right up until they level up, aren't they? You know those firecrackers that have strings on both ends and you pull them in the opposite direction at the same time and it makes the thing in the middle explode? I loved those as a kid, and I was playing with them outside one day when I suddenly had the bright idea that I could prank the mailman with one of them. So I tied it through our mailbox and made sure it was secure, and then tried it by opening the mailbox. Sure enough, it worked and the thing exploded and I thought it was amazing. So I set it up again and then I waited. I should include that I was curious if it would work, and then upon knowing it would work, curious to see the reaction of the mailman because I was under the impression it would be hilarious. It was not. He came around the same time every day, and I even knew his name by then, so when I saw him coming down the street, I ran inside and hid by peeking out the front window blinds. He walked up to our porch, went to open the mailbox, and stopped. I saw him inspect the mailbox, then back away slowly and just walk away. Before I even had the chance to go outside and figure out what had happened, I assumed it didn't work or he just didn't have any mail for us that day, a cop car came screeching down our street and stopped in front of my house, and an officer ran up to our door and started pounding. I was scared as all heck, but it was a cop, so I opened the door, and the cop pulls me outside and asks me what in the heck is going on, while pointing at the mailbox. I try as best as I can to explain myself and repeatedly mention, "It's a firecracker! It's a firecracker!" As I was freaking out and on the verge of tears, the mailman shows back up and he and the cop full-on verbally berate me, saying, "Stuff like this is not funny. It looks like it was wired up like a bomb. Tampering with mailboxes is a federal offense. You're lucky you're just a little kid or you'd be going to prison." They then forced me to open the mailbox and set the firecracker off, but by then I was so traumatized and upset that I did it as slowly as possible, which somehow prevented the firecracker going off as one of the strings just slipped out of it. The cop and the mailman then left and I untied the rest of the firecracker from the mailbox and then went back inside and hid in shame. The mailman was never once friendly to me again after that, and I've lived with the shame of it ever since. I cut the power cord of a fan with a pair of scissors. There was a flash and next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, my family would go on camping trips during the summer. My dad always bought a big kerosene lamp which was very bright, but it would heat up enough to burn flesh on contact. My dad told me so many times not to touch that lamp. I touched the lamp. My dad sat in silence across the campsite and watched me. I turned pale, started sweating, put on my best poker face. "Dad, you remember how you told me not to touch the lamp?" I fell asleep that night with my fingers in a cup of ice. This is one of Dad's funniest memories. I once touched the spinning blade from the food processor with the tip of my nail to see how fast it was spinning. Luckily, I only lost the tip of my nail and not my finger. No idea what I was thinking. I tried inhaling small stones and got them stuck in my nose for quite some time. It got really serious, and I needed an ENT doctor to remove it. I let my friend punch me in the face once, just to see what it was like to get punched in the face. I ate a leaf off the ground because I was wondering why we eat lettuce but not other leaves. Well, I figured that one out pretty quickly. I ran my thumb along my dad's shaving razor just to see if it would cut me. Surprise, surprise, it did, and I regretted my decision immediately. My family and I were on holiday, and the hotel we were staying at had a glass stovetop, completely different to the old-fashioned one we had at home. I figured it couldn't get that hot since it wasn't metal. So to test this theory, I parted my ponytail and plonked half of it on the stove while it was on. In a few seconds, I'd burnt the bottom section of the part I put on the stove. I was horrified, and so was my mum when she saw what I'd done. Later that week, my mum and I went to the hotel pool. She specifically told me not to go into the water without her. So I did the exact opposite when she wasn't looking. It was one of those pools with concrete steps, with the last step being more of a leap. I jumped straight onto the last step and nearly drowned. My mum is deaf and had her back turned while she was setting a nearby table up, so she didn't hear me splutter and scream when my head was above water. It was the scariest thing ever. I thought I was going to die right there and then. At one point, I blacked out for a few seconds and thought about my family and how they'd feel if I was no longer alive. I don't know how, but I mustered up the strength to eventually wrench myself out of the pool. Filled the locks on my parents' cars with twigs so they couldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't take me to the park, so I wouldn't let them go anywhere. It cost them a pretty penny to get them all out as well. I wanted to know what it felt like if you stood on your bed and jumped off it, landing on your knees without landing on your feet first. It felt like I broke both of my legs. I was a pretty stupid 8-year-old. I drank an entire bottle of cough medicine because I wanted to know if it would do me in. I was a 30-pound tiny kid, and Benadryl made me pass out for an entire day. My parents still don't know, and when I passed out, I was sure I was done. My brother told my sister that chewable children's Tylenol was candy and gave her a whole bottle. Luckily, our neighbor had Ipecac. Plugged in a wet extension cord to a wet extension outlet. Shot the power to the house and almost electrocuted myself. Used a metal kebab skewer to touch the pilot spark on the kitchen hob. The shock was great enough that I thought my friend next to me had punched me really hard in the shoulder. I turned and had a go at him. Shortly after, I realized I'd just shocked myself. Me and my friend grabbed garbage bags and climbed up on the roof to jump off and see if they'd work as parachutes. They didn't, but I think it's because we needed more height. Cartoons have a lot to answer for with regards to our perception of physics in the world growing up. They show you that literally any sheet of anything other than paper can be used with the same degree of success as a specially made parachute. The other regular experiment for the narrator was being certain that any similar fabric stretched out would serve as an amazing trampoline. I broke so many towels and bedsheets. Sorry, Mum. I touched one of the cigarette lighters found in cars after pushing it in several times and thinking it wasn't working to find out what the coils feel like. Well, they feel hot. I'm 32 and I did this the other day. A joker of an airline hostess said to keep all baggage and children under the seat in front of you. My parents are jerks, so I climbed under a chair in the plane. My uncle, who lived with my grandparents, has a tobacco addiction. He used to keep bundles of it in his room's bedside drawer and chew on it all the time. I, a 10-year-old girl, was very fascinated by it somehow and wanted to look cool chewing tobacco. When no one was in the room, I snuck in, took a bundle and emptied it into my mouth. Now, of course, 10-year-old me didn't know that the tobacco juice should be spat out and not swallowed. So I swallowed the whole thing after chewing it for some time. A few minutes later, the effects kicked in and my head started spinning so bad. I ran to the living room couch and crashed. I lay there for the rest of the day. I couldn't even lift my head up without feeling like throwing up and giddy. My dad and grandmother thought I was unwell and were very concerned. They didn't know what this little brat had done to herself. My grandma suggested to eat something after a few hours and brought me rice and yogurt, Indian comfort food for sick people. I somehow managed to eat it while still feeling like crap. Suddenly, my stomach started churning and I felt the yogurt and rice making its way up. I ran to the washroom and emptied my insides. In the end, a glob of tobacco also came up. I felt much better afterwards. My parents still don't know about it, and my grandmother passed away a few years back, so she never will. I was a teen, but I shot myself through the foot with a homemade blowgun to see if it could pierce flesh. It went all the way through. I glued the tips of my thumb and index finger with superglue. I glued my hands together on purpose with superglue once. I'd used to do that with white glue for fun, to remove the dry glue like a snake skin or something. And this one time, my mum was using superglue to fix something, and I decided to try it. After a minute, when I tried to pull my hands apart and couldn't do it, I went crying to my mum. I was about 6 and kind of a crybaby. She freaked out, started to cry too, and spent the next couple of hours using a ruler and warm and hot water to separate my hands. After that, I wasn't really interested in playing with any kind of glue for a while. I had a very large, heavy head when I was younger. We went on a hiking holiday and were walking across a beach with rock pools. Me, being the curious child I was, knelt down beside a pool and looked over to see what I could find. Next thing you know, my giant head overbalanced my 6-year-old body, and I slid headfirst into the pool. Luckily, my dad came and pulled me out before I drowned, and wrapped me up in spare clothes. I saw some interesting sea life while I was under there, though. It certainly satisfied my curiosity. Well, here's the list of my misdeeds and their consequences. I pulled the fire alarm in my school. It went off. The fire truck came. I put my finger in a wasp nest and got stung by a wasp. I tried to shave with my father's razor, and I cut my face. I touched a hot stove and burned my finger. And I should mention at the end that I graduated from an Ivy League university. So there's hope for you dumb kids. I was a really dumb and kinda curious child, so I regularly searched up for the youngest anime girls I could using my grandma's cell phone. I put all sorts of viruses on the damned thing, and she's probably on a list now. Sorry, Grandma. I drank fabric softener when I was 7, thinking that it would give me magic powers. I had to go to A&E and have my stomach pumped and drink charcoal. Another time I drank Head & Shoulders thinking it would give me magic powers. It resulted in yet another trip to the hospital and yet another charcoal drink. Look guys, I really wanted magic powers. So you know that kitchen appliance which is essentially a handheld blender? Well, in all of my immense wisdom, I thought it would be a good idea to stick my thumb in and press the button. I can't say it ended well for 2-year-old me. I fell through the ice. I'd wondered if it was thick enough yet, and it wasn't. When I was younger, me and my parents were at the zoo. We'd been wandering around for an hour, and then we came across this empty enclosure. My parents decided to screw with me and say that there was an invisible snake in the enclosure, and you could tell because the grass was moving. Of course, my dumb idiot butt believed this, not understanding that it was the wind. My parents said they'd adopt it for me. So of course, I then went to school on Monday telling everyone I'd adopted an invisible snake. I used a spray-on deodorant as a flamethrower to see if the rumors were true that it would work. It did. I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. Made a chlorine bomb to see if the rumors were true that it would work, and it did. Again, I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. I used matches to make mini rockets to see if the rumors were true that it would work, and it did. I could have caused all kinds of damage to property or myself. Made a papier-mâché volcano and burnt paper inside to see if it would work. It did. I ended up with a burnt circle of carpet under my bed and a very sore butt. I tasted mud because it looked like chocolate. I put aftershave on my ball bag when I was young. I don't know why. All I remember is burning and screaming. You know, I must have been really little. I was standing indoors next to a huge potted plant. There was this round thing sitting on the dirt in the pot, like a mushroom or conker. In hindsight, it was likely some sort of mushroom. Well, I picked it up, sniffed it, and it smelt okay, so I bit it. It tasted weird, and I thought maybe it was a seed or something, so I put it back and got a drink. I looked up what was in gunpowder in the World Book Encyclopedia. I went to 2 different pharmacies to get the nitrate and sulfur, ground up some charcoal to get carbon, made a giant firecracker out of a toilet paper tube and masking tape, fashioned a wick from toilet paper and gunpowder. I placed it in the fork between 2 branches on my dad's only and favorite peach tree, finally taking hold after a few tough Michigan winters. I lit the wick and ran to the garage for safety. I watched it go off. Big boom. Big flame. Split the peach tree right up the middle. Dad was very sad, but said he was glad I didn't blow myself up by accident. Eventually it healed, but it never thrived. It bore an occasional peach. I was about 12. This was 63 years ago, by the way. When did you make an epic escape from a terrible situation? I was out in the bluff country of the upper Mississippi with my dog in the early winter. I was at the base of a cliff and came across a hole about 10 inches across that had some moist, warm air coming out. I cave sometimes, and I got excited at the prospect of finding a new, potentially live one. Took my dog home and came back the next day with a helmet, headlamp, and some general caving gear. After kicking out the entrance so it was wide enough for me to crawl in, I proceeded through sort of an upward crawl space, about 1 or 2 feet tall. About 6 feet in, it opened up into a small chamber, and when I shined my headlamp across the floor, it was covered in tiny glints. They were the eyes of rattlesnakes, and I mean hundreds of rattlesnakes. I'd stumbled across one of their winter dens. I slowly backed out and got the whole F out of there. In short, I thought I found a new live cave, came across a rattlesnake hibernation den. Went to Ocean City, Maryland, and there was a full rising moon in the east. I wanted to see it, so I set my alarm for 1 a.m. to watch it over the ocean. You know, that time of year from when the heat, where the moon looks about 6 times as big as it is when it rises, it's blood red. Well, really dark orange anyway. I should have taken that as an omen. As I was walking, I heard a muffled scream or something from behind one of the umbrella boxes or changing stations. I snuck up and some guys were trying to commit the unspeakable act on some girl. I thought it was animals fighting. I had no idea what I'd started to see. Then I heard someone say, "Shut up or we're gonna cut you." One of them had his pants down and she was struggling between the 2 other guys. I don't know why I did it, but I picked up what I guess was a piece of the post fencing and I started beating the crap out of the guys. Since I was quiet because of the sand and it was all to their heads and I was wearing dark colors, I guess I had them by surprise. A whack to each of their heads so hard that nobody even gave an alert as to what was happening, just falling over. 1, 2, 3, all of them fell down. I was actually scared I'd killed one of them or something, but he was moaning. The girl looked up at me and I said, "Come on, we've got to run now." And we did, as they were getting up. I guess they did because they sounded pretty angry, but I knew I really hit the F out of the first guy. We sprinted as hard as we could on the sand and jumped a fence and rattled some doors and ran into someone who woke up and called the police. Her father thanked me. She told me that they had a gat, or she said they did. She never saw one, just the knife. Turns out her dad was some Muslim priest and she and him had gotten into an argument, so she'd walked off to cool down a bit. Her dad went the other way down the beach to look for her, and then she ran into those drunk college kids. In short, snuck up and beat up some guys trying to commit the unspeakable act on a girl and then booked it out of there faster than lightning. I'm lucky I lived. Well done, and congratulations on finding maybe the best feasible situation where someone can actually sneak up and take on 3 other guys. Most stories of one person taking on multiple assailants, even if that person has like a black belt or something, just don't go very well. Hope the girl was alright. 2001. After just having discovered that my then-wife was having an affair, I decided I need to get out of town for a while to clear my head. The next day, I was on a flight to LA to spend some time with my best friends from high school who had moved there years prior. What transpired was 2 weeks of insane amounts of drinking and at least one failed trip to drive up to Vegas in the middle of the night. On the night before I had to head back to face the reality of the situation, my friends had concluded that the best remedy for me was to get me into bed with someone else before heading home. After much alcohol consumption, we headed to a club in downtown LA where my friend had heard a person could get special treatment for the right amount of money. To this day, I don't know if it was a nightclub or a joint where women take their clothes off for money, because we never made it past the bouncer at the front door. He turned us away because he could tell how drunk we already were. On the way back to my friend's car, we were approached by a homeless man who was looking for a handout. Instead of giving him some money for one, my friends asked him if he knew of a place where we could go to find female companionship. The man obliged and proceeded to lead us around the corner to a very shady apartment building in what turned out to be a very shady part of town. When we arrived at that building, the homeless man buzzed one of the apartments, and several minutes later, a man appeared at the door who was the spitting image of Eazy-E. For all I know, it was Eazy-E. After whispering with the homeless man, Eazy-E gave each of us a very judging look over and without saying a word, nodded for us to follow him. What followed next could sound like it was coming straight from some bad comedy flick or a stereotypical gang flick. 3 white guys climbing up 4 flights of stairs in what was clearly either the worst apartment complex in LA, a straight-up smack house, or both. Around the time we reached the top floor, the combination of fear and adrenaline began to rapidly cleanse my system of all the booze. At this point, we were instructed to wait at the top of the stairs while Eazy-E went down the hall and into one of the apartments. By now, I was completely sober and I began to desperately try and get my friend's attention. Psst, psst, let's get the frick out of here. My friends either couldn't hear me or were too engrossed in seeing what was going to happen next, so neither of them really acknowledged me. I was beginning to really freak out, and I slowly began inching my way back to the stairwell, and that is when it happened. All of a sudden, this woman emerged from the apartment down the hall. She was the spitting image of a stereotypical ghetto woman, about 300 pounds, fake hair, long fake nails, giant hoop earrings, wearing nothing but a sports support and biker shorts, both of which were stretched to the max. She sauntered up to our little group, looked over all of us, and in a loud voice announced, "Who wants some of this?" I'm not sure what exactly happened next, but all I remember was running. Before I knew it, I was outside on the street, running back to where I thought our car was. I took a second to look back to see both of my friends chasing behind me, with the homeless man chasing behind them. Luckily, I found our car, and we all jumped in and got the frick out of there as fast as was humanely possible. In short, who wants to get some of this? It was my late junior year of high school, and I was at another school's house party. It was all going pretty well, except there was a lot of people in the backyard. Eventually, one of the neighbors that was family friends came over. It was a husband and wife, both in their 40s, in full-on suburban warfare mood. Put the ganja and alcohol down, we called the cops, they're on our way. At the time, I was on probation for a minor possession charge, so all I needed to hear was cops and I was gone. I left through the front of the house, running like the devil himself was chasing me. I was out of the house, down the street, and in my car before anybody else had even moved. I brought my car back to the house to get my friends, but these people were blocking the backyard entrance. Impatient and nervous, I do the honors. F these people, they can't make you stay, let's get the F out of here. At that moment, one of my friends I came with, who was being blocked by the neighbor, decided he'd had enough. All I saw was him come flying through the backyard entrance and knock the silly out of the guy blocking the exit. That opened the floodgates. In about 15 seconds, the house was cleared. I was pulling away as the kid who owned the house decides to say, "Screw it," and bailed. I gave him a fighting chance and popped my trunk. At the time, I had an old Ford Explorer. He jumped into the trunk, slammed the door behind him, and screams, "Go, go, go!" And we were gone. A few years ago, some friends and I were out drinking in downtown Toronto where we all live. We were in a cab going from one bar to another to meet some friends. As the cab driver pulls up to our destination, my friend, who's sitting in the driver's side back seat, opens his door just as a streetcar, sort of like a mini train for public transit like they have in San Francisco, was going by. The front corner of the streetcar takes the cab door clean off its hinges. The cab driver and streetcar driver both get out and start screaming at each other. No one seems to realize it was actually my friend's fault, so we drop the cab fare plus a generous tip into the driver's seat and quietly exit through the opposite side. I mean, even though you gave him some money, I can't say that you're a great person for this, although I don't know who'd come out on top of an insurance fight in this particular case, since you buggered off. I hope the taxi driver didn't get stuck with the bill or thousands for the repair. Oof. In 2005, I was traveling in China after taking a year off after high school. I'd already been all over Japan, Australia, Southeast Asia, and China was the last place I was visiting before coming home. I flew into Beijing and decided to spend about a week there before heading on. So it's about 3 days in and I'm walking through Tiananmen Square on my way somewhere when these two Asian girls ask me to hold a camera and get a picture. Now, something you have to know is that there is, or at least there was this thing where Chinese girls or sometimes guys would come up to tourists and try and get them to go with them to some phony art exhibit or something and pressure them to buy some overpriced piece of crap. I'd seen this kind of thing before and just stayed clear. But this time the same red flags weren't going off. One of the girls spoke near-perfect English and the other girl's was passable. And after a minute or two of chatting, there was no mention of any of the usual scam stuff, so I figured they must be legit. We continued chatting and eventually wandered around the area for a bit. Then, after about an hour, one of the girls suggested that we go to a karaoke place. Karaoke was pretty popular across Asia at the time, but it isn't done like karaoke is in North America. In Japan, at least, you rent a small room with a karaoke machine. The price of the room included a few drinks, but you could also order more from a menu. So we got to this place, and then the red flags start going off. First thing I see when we get to it is that it's some kind of restaurant, but although it's the middle of the dinner rush, it's completely empty, save for a couple of guys in cheap suits sitting around a table not eating or drinking. Keep in mind that this is less than a dozen blocks from the Forbidden Palace, so you'd think it would be a little more crowded. Frick, I think. Then we get led into a back room with a big banquet table and one tiny TV with the world's crappiest karaoke machine hooked up to it, and I got handed this drink menu where the prices are crazy high, like high enough to include things besides drinks. So I start thinking that chances are pretty good that this is a place for working girls. And chances are also pretty good that if I don't buy anything, I'm going to be robbed and forced to empty my debit card. Luckily, I keep a cool head and start to think of ways out of there. Fortunately, on the way into this back room to the door, the bathroom was open and I could see that there was a window big enough for me to fit through that was cracked open. I was sitting there 98% sure that I was about to be robbed and decided that the bathroom is the best bet out of there. So I say I have to use the bathroom, leave enough money to cover the one drink that I ordered, it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and surreptitiously grab my backpack and head to the washroom. I then proceed to throw my bag out through the window and squeeze myself through after it. After that, I took off running as fast as I could and caught the first cab that I could see half a block down and sweated bullets all the way back to my hostel. I found out later that something similar happened to a friend of mine who was traveling in Turkey. He met a fellow backpacker who suggested that they go out for a drink, and when they got there, the drinks were way overpriced. Turns out that the different drinks were covers for different types of bedroom acts with working girls, which apparently the other guy knew but neglected to mention. When my friend realized this, he tried to leave but was held up by a couple of guys and forced to withdraw as much as he could from an ATM. He ended up having to have his parents wire him money so that he could get home. In short, escaped from being robbed in a foreign country by diving out of a bathroom window. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There is a racial slur that begins with N. We've replaced it with the word jigger in the 2 times it appears in this story. Anyways, some friends and I left a club in Boston one night and were pretty well lubricated by then. 2 of my friends were running down the middle of the road looking for an open cab when one of them stops at a minivan and taps on the passenger side window. In the van were 4 large black guys, which my friend slurringly asked to give us a ride. The guy in the passenger seat responded with, "Yeah, but we roll hard. You roll hard?" At this point, my friend screams to me, "Yo, it's cool. My jiggers are going to give us a ride." At that point, I decided it was time to leave, so I grabbed my friend and told him to keep walking, but he yelled, "But I want to do some smack with my jiggers." Then I decided it was really time to leave. When I was 16, I was at the mall with a friend of mine who was telling me horrible stories about her friend. We turned a corner just as I exclaimed, "That's disgusting," really loudly. All 100 pounds of me suddenly noticed a very tall, very overweight man sitting on a bench with his equally overweight child attached to one of those leashes they used to have for kids. Well, he looks me right in the eye and says, "What's disgusting, huh?" and proceeds to stand up and come menacingly at me. I tried to explain that it was the story my friend was talking about, but he was having none of it. I booked it out of there really quickly and still felt really badly about the whole situation, as I could only imagine what he thought I'd been talking about. I was out for drinks with a friend of mine and a guy from work. The guy from work had a hard time controlling his drinking, so by the time we got to the sake place, I told him he was cut off. He was falling over at this point. At one point, he goes to the bathroom, and when he comes back, he's clutching his hand for some reason. I'm like, "Mike, what happened to your hand?" And he answered, I hurt it somehow. I might have broken the sink too." Oh crap. I like this place. Cheap beer, sake, and appetizers. So I go to check the bathroom. No damage. Phew. This place is one of those tiny Asian restaurants with 2 one-person bathrooms, male and female. I sit back down and said, "Mike, guy's room looks fine. Maybe you damaged the faucet somehow." His answer was, "Oh, no. I was in the girls' room." So I check the girls' bathroom. Devastation. Apparently he slipped on the wet floor, caught himself on the sink, and ripped this entire beautiful porcelain sink off the wall. It was the kind where water runs around in circles before it gets to your hands. All that's left is a glued-on cross-section of a sink on the wall and a pile of porcelain pieces on the floor with a metal faucet sticking up out of them. As a bonus, there was blood everywhere. Even the toilet looks pink. In the words of my friend, it looked like New York City was less one working girl that night. Apparently, he cut his hand on the sink and it sprayed everywhere as he fell. I tended to Mike's hand while my other friend started discreetly mopping up the blood trail that leads from the girls' room to our table with his shoes. A pile of blood is forming under Mike. Meantime, the owners realize what's happening, and upon seeing this disaster, what do? Nothing. They pretend nothing happened. No cops, just mops. I immediately demand the check, citing as my reason for leaving that I no longer feel well, which was half true by that point. I did not return to my favorite sake bomb place for months. In short, drunken coworker destroys public bathroom, creating a bloody mess, and I discreetly exit. This is not what most of us mean when we warn our friends that we're going to destroy their bathrooms. Such a wild thing to be on everyone's mind in the break room the next Monday. This is why we only drink with colleagues at our own peril. When I was a dumb pre-teen kid, a friend and I were screwing around and decided it would be fun to throw eggs at cars. We positioned ourselves at the end of an alley that dead-ended on a small hill that overlooked a fairly busy street, but didn't connect to it. We figured it was the perfect spot, because we were higher up than the streets, and a car couldn't get to us without going around the block. Plus, there weren't any streetlights nearby. After hitting a few cars with eggs, we truly unleashed on one car. A couple of eggs in each hand. We'd probably hit that windshield with 4 or 5 eggs at once. That's when the red and blue lights on the roof of that car came on. Because there were no streetlights nearby, we didn't realize it was a frickin' cop car. We hauled butt while the cop car sped around the block trying to get to our alley. Luckily, my buddy's house was just down said alley, and we ducked inside before the cop found us. He circled the neighborhood for half an hour, shining his spotlight into yards. In short, don't throw eggs at cop cars. My friend and I were on our way to a different town for some drinks with a friend of ours. It's a drive, probably like 45 minutes. Anyway, we were passing a big old roll of Mary J back and forth by the time we hit the city limits, and pulled up next to this guy driving an old RWD V8. You know the one I'm talking about. Brown, rust spots, big engine that's not quite in tune, but when you put it down, the tires on the thing will still scream. It's about 11 p.m. and we're parked at a four-way with woods behind us and the town is in front of us, with 2 streets sitting perpendicular to us. Anyway, he looked over at us and revs the engine. I'm driving a Jeep, so I tap the gas and jokingly nod over at him like we're gonna do this thing. Stoplight turns green and he hits it hard. I stay parked and just watch him with my mouth open and the number still in my hand. The guy starts fishtailing all over the road, goes really far right, overcorrects, left past the double yellow line, almost hits another car which swerves out of his way, overcorrects back over the double yellow line really hard, jumps the curb on the right side of the street and plows directly into a storefront's giant plate glass window. Glass just showered all over that car. The guy throws the car in reverse, sprayed landscaped bushes all over the inside of the building he'd inadvertently entered, backs up into a street sign, then burns out down the road. The car that had swerved to avoid him whips a U-turn and chases after him as well. By then, the light had turned red, and I turned to my friend and honestly asked him if I'd hallucinated the entire thing. He said, no, that definitely happened. When we left our buddies at about 3 a.m., there were cops everywhere, taping off the building and digging around in the bushes. I thought about stopping them and telling them what happened, but I just decided it wasn't worth possibly getting arrested. A young 16-year-old me invited to a house party in a nearby town. A nice place, but the party was populated by a bit more of an alternative crowd than the younger me had grown up with. There was a band playing terrible music in the living room, kids hitting up pipes in the host's mother's bedroom, nowhere near enough room for all the folk that had decided that this was the place to be that Friday evening. Eventually, it all spilled out into the streets. A friend who'd accompanied me that night was spotted being led by one of the local emo-looking girls out onto the field across from the house. He was a perennial geek amongst geeks, this guy. This was just not his style, but he liked her, so we left him to it. We all knew he was about to get lucky, and we were happy for him, albeit in a field in northwest of England. Ah, what a place to lose it. Bless him. After the fact, we all met up again upstairs, passing around a big old spliff and high-fiving. The next thing we know, music is off, folk are shouting, and footsteps are getting louder. Lots of them. It turned out the girl was supposed to be with the lead singer of the band, who in turn happened to be the host. And one of her friends had decided that she was being just a little bit too much of a working girl. Door swings open, we drop the devil's lettuce to the deck, and all turn in shock as a long-haired, greasy black metal fan attempts to decimate each of us with his Ibanez. We pushed him to the ground, barged our way down the stairs and out the front door. Having thought we were clear of danger now, we call a taxi to pick us up. Having been quiet for about 5 minutes, we decide everything is fine. Close call. In actual fact, the offended vocalist had spent his 5 minutes getting troops and a hunting pack together in a fashion I find reminiscent of Age of Empires army building. They spotted us walking down the road and decided to make chase. We spotted our taxi and decided to make haste. We made it, just in time, safe in the taxi with the locks on the door. The taxi driver saw my lips move but couldn't make out what I was saying over all the banging on the windows. But he eventually clicked on. In that moment, I was Jack frickin' Bauer screaming, "Get us the frick out of here!" When I was 19, a couple of friends and I decided to go to this bar that had opened up not too far away. It was the kind of place that didn't card and we wanted drinks. We got there and one of the guys I was with was carrying a pocket knife. The bouncer told him he couldn't take it in, so he left it with the girl at the front. Well, after an hour, we start to realize just how shady this place is, so we decide to leave. As we're walking out, the guy realizes he needs to get his knife back, so he goes back inside. My other friend and I are just sitting outside the door waiting when we hear an argument break out about 20 feet away. After some shouting back and forth in Spanish between the parties, we hear shots. At that point, we both roadie run to my truck and duck behind the tires. A few seconds later, the other guy we were with shows up and we get the heck out of there. A few months later, the whole place was shut down due to a police investigation involving gangs and people being chopped up in the basement. In short, went to a bar, shots fired, pieced the ever-loving frick out. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.